Episode 16, 2015. In times like the present, men should utter nothing for which they would not willingly be responsible through time and in eternity.
Now, on Inside the Buffalo...
Wait! Can't use that title. How about this? All right. Folks, welcome once again to another episode of Down and Drought. We have only 2 episodes remaining, this one and the next one. If you got through all of 2014, again, cheers to you, viewer. You did it. I'm Prescott Rossi, he's that Brown, and back once again, Matt Fairburn from Syracuse.com and the Post-Standard. Let's dive right into the start of 2015 because the Bills don't have a quarterback, they don't have a head coach. Oh no, what is happening to this football team? Well, right at the start of 2015, Friday, January 2nd, Tim Graham, our dear friend from the Buffalo News, reports that Doug Whaley is leading the coaching search for the next Bills head coach. And here are the candidates, and see if some of these names sound familiar. Adam Gase, Frank Reich, Jim Schwartz, Dan Quinn, Darrell Bevell, Josh McDaniels, Mike Shanahan, Hugh Jackson, Pep Hamilton, Pat Shurmur, and Greg Roman. Now, there's a name that's not there, and there's some surprising names in there. What were your thoughts at the start of the Bills coaching search in 2015?
I didn't have a guy I liked, but I thought it was a pretty good crop to choose from. It seemed like there were a lot. I mean, Dan Quinn was hotly desired. Todd Bowles was pretty well regarded in a lot of places. Adam Gase, obviously. So there were going to be options for the Bills. And as opposed to the most recent coaching search, where I didn't think they really had much of anything to choose from, in 2015, I thought there were guys there where, especially if the Bills wanted to go young and up and coming, they're going to end up with someone with a pretty good upside.
Yeah, it felt to me when that happened like the Pegulas weren't necessarily expecting it. They were pretty much brand new owners, and there was all the Bill Polian stuff that was floating around before that. And so when Doug Marrone decided to opt out of his contract, all of a sudden they were like, okay, we need to cover all of our bases, talk to as many people as possible. And I think that's why the net was so wide that time, as opposed to this year. They felt like they had already talked to a lot of those people before, and they had a different idea of how to go about it. And it was an interesting coaching search. Obviously, Doug Whaley was leading it to start, but Russ Brandon was involved. The Pegulas obviously became more involved as they got more comfortable, and they ended up going down a different road.
Yeah, they sure did. It kind of became a running joke, too, how many interviews they did. It was, another one? Yeah. I mean, what was the number? Are we up to teens, 15, whatever?
Yeah, and all over the course of 1 week. And you mentioned Bill Polian. On New Year's Day, he tells ESPN that he's staying at ESPN. He's not going to join the Bills as a football czar. Well, then on Sunday, January 4th, 2 days after the news that Whaley is leading the coaching search, Adam Schefter reports that Marrone was unhappy with the Watkins trade and that the Bills are going to interview Rex Ryan and Kyle Shanahan. And then, as you see later in the week, that Schefter tweets that, I remember, Thad, you and I were working on this Saturday, that the Bills are going to bring in Rex Ryan for a second interview. And then all of a sudden, just, as these things tend to happen, okay, here's the second interview, and about 12 hours later, there's our guy. The fact that Rex is coming to the Bills is unveiled on Sunday, January 11th at 7:57 a.m. But then Kim Jones reports that Rex has a 5-year deal, and Alex Marvez says that the Pegulas are heavily invested in the coaching search. And the whirlwind and the unknowing of who runs the Bills is pretty evident at this point, because who's calling the shots? And as Russ Brandon even says in his press conference, that he was heavily involved as well with the Rex Ryan hire. Just your thoughts as Rex is now the guy, and it seems like the Pegulas have taken this decision away from Doug Whaley.
If I take myself back to when the move happened, I really liked it. I thought Rex was the right guy at the right time for the Bills. I never thought Rex was going to coach a team to the Super Bowl. But I thought you put Rex with that great, talented defense, you let him do his rah-rah thing and pump the team up for a couple of games a year. You could get them from 9-7, 8-8, which is what they were the year before, to 10 wins, and you could take care of the drought. The drought would be gone. He would get them to the playoffs. Yeah, they didn't have a quarterback, so you're not winning a Super Bowl, but the Bills would have that drought monkey off their back. On the other hand, when you look back at it and you look at the extended dysfunction that the Bills have had up until the McDermott Bean era.
Supposedly.
We'll see if it really happens, but supposedly, that hiring really just was kerosene on a fire, because you had Doug Marrone bails. You didn't know who was in charge, like you said. Is Doug Whaley running the interview? Is it the Pegulas? Is it Russ Brandon? And then you bring in the ultimate NFL circus act to be your head coach. It was probably the absolute wrong hire at the wrong time for the Bills.
Yeah, I was intrigued when it happened, but I wouldn't say I was sold on him. It was more of all right, buckle up because he's going to take us on a ride. And that's what he does. And you mentioned the power structure, and that became evident. I believe the quote from Terry Pegula was, that Russ told them, you can't let this guy leave the building. And I remember at the time, Rex was kind of an interesting candidate because ESPN was after him. There was rumors that he might go into television. Atlanta was sort of on his trail. And then, I remember thinking the Pegulas made the splash hire. And I was a little surprised that they were able to reel in Rex because he was such a big fish. And it felt like they were able to get the headline hire that they wanted. But from a football standpoint, I was always a little bit skeptical because, we just talked about 2014, that strange Bills team that was pretty average pounded the Jets twice. And I got to thinking, man, I don't know about this guy, but it was exciting, and that introductory press conference certainly did not disappoint.
Absolutely. Wednesday, January 14th is the first press conference, the introductory press conference with Rex Ryan. He taps on the mic, says, is this thing on? And I just remember just one quote after another. And well, this is definitely not Doug Marrone. But, to your point, that thing in the back of your mind, the Bills just beat the stuffing out of the Jets just last season. You had a game in Detroit where the Jets had a whole week to prepare in their own facility. The Bills are scrambling all over the place, and you still lose by 30-something points. But, Rex, he talks a big game, and what better spot for him than at his first press conference. And I just remember the immediate response from Bills fans was oh, man, to your point, the monkey is over. We're going to the playoffs. Rex even says that. Get ready. We're going. I just remember coming away from that presser there sure is a lot of flash here.
I don't think there was ever a year, once we got into the drought era, where Bills fans were more optimistic than 2015.
This thing on? Because it's getting ready to be on. I'm so proud to be given this opportunity. I'm not going to let our fans down. I am not going to do that. Okay, I know it's been 15 years since the Bills made the playoffs. Well, get ready, man. We're going.
And I talked to so many people, and I felt it, where you thought this was the year the Bills were finally not only going to the playoffs, but maybe make some noise. Rex had done that with Mark Sanchez, who turns out to be next to nothing as a quarterback, and gone to 2 conference title games with him. So the Bills' defense was talented enough, and they had enough pieces on offense, and they soon would get another one. But they had enough pieces on offense to where you'd think Rex could figure out how to get it done.
This is the shot that I want. But I wanted to make sure that everybody was the same vision, that I could feel it, I can sense it. And when Russ, Doug, Terry, and Kim, that's what I felt. I know the passion. It's not just my passion, it's everybody's passion. We want to bring a championship to Buffalo. There is no doubt, and I felt it. And I felt there was one direction and one vision for the team. As Terry likes to say, we have one ego. I go, yes, sir, that's exactly right. When he hired me, that ego got a little bigger.
The number one thing I left that press conference thinking was the Bills are all of a sudden of national interest, which was not the case when I arrived, and from what I understand was not the case for many years prior to that. And I think that was my biggest takeaway. Outside of all the football stuff, because like I said, I was very skeptical. He was pretty far removed from those years you're talking about where he made noise in the playoffs, but you left. You just looked around at the press conference, all the New York media, all the national media that were there, and Rex knew how to play to them. And all of a sudden, ESPN's paying more attention, Sports Illustrated's in the building a lot more, and you're like, well, at the very least, the Pegulas have made themselves a national team for once, something that the Bills just weren't. For the longest time. And that was sort of the interesting part was, man, this guy just made a lot of promises. He's not going to be afraid to do anything. And I'm thinking, I better be on my game because all of a sudden there's going to be a lot of national eyes on this beat and a lot of people wondering what the heck this guy's up to. So it was a splash hire in the biggest way. And the offseason kept rolling from there because Rex isn't afraid to make the splash moves. And he made that pretty evident very early on.
And the thing that I said too right from day one, and it was never untrue, was that With Rex Ryan, you could take a Wednesday press conference in Week 6 after a game where the Bills had gone, they're 3-3. In other words, not relevant or story-worthy at all. And Rex would give you something, and you could not miss it. And it was, you could not stay away from those press conferences. And we've become to realize it now that we've seen Sean McDermott do a few.
I've never lost my swagger, my confidence in myself and the people that I surround myself with. We absolutely are not going to be pushed around. Now, we're going to do a lot of pushing ourselves, I'll promise you that. But we will build a bully, and that's what we can't wait to get and started doing.
You mentioned the optimism felt at that time. Compounding that, Doug Marrone doesn't have a job, and he lands in Jacksonville as an associate head coach. He's the O-line coach. It's the Jaguars. Not that the Bills have really anything special, but it's Jacksonville, and he goes out and says he didn't quit, and everybody's just like, "You did quit. You quit on Buffalo." And then also feeling the thought of like the Bills had the 4th-ranked defense in 2014, and now here comes Rex Ryan, the supposed defensive guru, to come in and take this defense and make them otherworldly. So yeah, that optimism right there at the start of 2015 was unmatched in the time I've been here, and I'm sure you're correct. In the 17 years, I can't imagine it was much higher than that. You see the Bills have 60,000 season tickets in 2015. I mean, the Kool-Aid was everywhere in Western New York. It did turn into Jonestown a bit, though. And speaking about big moves that Rex Ryan and the Bills made, Saturday, February 7th, the Bills signed Richie Incognito after spending a year outside of the NFL where he was toxic, he was poison after the bullying scandal in Miami. And Rex even said in his introductory press conference he wanted to build a bully with the Bills. Now he's actually bringing one in.
Richie Incognito was suspended the last half of 2013 for his involvement in the Dolphins' bullying scandal, but was reinstated after the season. And despite contact with multiple teams last year, he could not find a job. Well, he found one today in Buffalo. Reportedly, Incognito signed a 1-year deal with the Bills for $2.25 million. Now, this is Incognito's second stop in Buffalo. He played 3 games for the Bills in 2009. That was after he was cut by a Rams team that in 2009 went 1-15. They got tired of his stupid penalties and off-the-field issues. He was also accused of sexual assault while playing for the Dolphins in the summer of 2012 at a golf tournament. He's a tough, rugged run blocker. Will fit right into the Rex Ryan scheme, but that's only if he can keep his head on straight.
Richie Incognito on that day tells NFL Network he wants to prove he's not a racist jerk. I think if you have to say that, you're probably a racist jerk. But your thoughts, fellas, that Richie Incognito is coming to Western New York?
Did not like the move, for all those reasons that you just mentioned, but also understood that he was a pretty good lineman, and the Bills needed guards in the worst way at that time. So if he was going to come to Buffalo and walk the straight and narrow, I thought that there was a pretty good chance it would turn out, not bad at all, and I think it actually exceeded expectations. He is stayed in line for the most part, but, outside of the off-the-field stuff, the racist jerk stuff, he was a player, the football player the Bills needed at a position they needed help at badly.
Yeah, I knew right away that he was going to be a guy that had a ton to prove, and that's, the type of player that Rex Ryan likes to bring in. Every move Rex Ryan made, starting with that one, it was hard to be surprised. Everything Rex said, it was hard to be surprised. That's your initial reaction, and then you remember where you are and who you're talking to, who you're dealing with. With Richie Incognito, I thought, I wondered what he had left and what, the year away from football would do to him. But I also realized this isn't a guy that's going to necessarily get himself in trouble off the field in the way we see other guys do it, getting arrested, things like that. He seemed like a guy that had learned his lesson and was out to prove that everything that happened in Miami was, misinterpreted. And plus, I knew he could get away with a lot more under Rex Ryan. So I thought, man, they did need guards in the worst way. That offensive line was rough, and I thought, what better way to fix the offensive line than bringing a guy that has so much to prove? And then I just got to thinking, what else is coming? Because if he's willing to bring in Richie Incognito, all bets are off at this point.
There's a lot of stuff I did away from the field. I worked with a lot of people, worked with a lot of family members, spent a lot of time with close friends, and really it was an incredibly humbling experience, but it was also a great learning experience.
When we signed him, I was happy. He was a great teammate. Obviously a good player, and when he was here, he was a fantastic teammate, and I wasn't down when all that junk went down in Miami. So I tend to base my opinions on my firsthand experience with people, and I had a great time with him as a teammate, and I'm glad he's here.
We see Richie in the locker room, we see him on the field, on the sideline, and it does seem like his teammates really enjoy playing for him. Richie, that said, Richie still, says things in the locker room. You go like, ooh, Rich, I don't know that you should do that. Just fellas, what are your interactions like with Richie Incognito and your thoughts, in the 2 years since he joined the Bills?
You can see where he, can, I don't want to say ingratiate himself, but where he can easily get along with guys in that locker room. He is, a gregarious guy, a fun football player to be around. He's also the guy that's not afraid to snap the towel at someone else's backside, at their expense. And that's a football culture thing. I played high school football, so I remember at least that part of it. And what you said about there are things that Richie says, you're like, you could tell whatever happened in Miami, he hasn't quite walked himself completely away from it. He still is that guy, but he is also making the effort to, function within guidelines to keep himself in pro football.
Yeah, I think all of that is fair. I think I've enjoyed interacting with Richie Incognito on a daily basis, but I hesitate to say he's a changed man, and I think he would hesitate to say that as well. I think what he is now is a bit smarter, knowing how to navigate it, knowing who he is, what he can get away with, what he can't get away with. I think that that whole ordeal in Miami, I don't know that we'll ever get to the ultimate truth of the matter, but I think what it did was it made him realize, it made him hesitant to trust his teammates, and he towed the line for a little while before he got comfortable with guys like Eric Wood and things like that. But you almost wonder what the difference is between, Richie Incognito, Eric Wood. There's probably more Richie Incognitos in the NFL than get brought to, the public eye. And he happened to get brought into the public eye. It doesn't excuse anything he did or didn't do, but I think he's ultimately a guy that, like you said, a lot of people in that locker room like to follow. And I think, Tyrod Taylor and other leaders have helped kind of keep him in check, but Richie's a leader in his own way, and Rex let him be himself. Like I said, everybody in that locker room sort of let him be himself. There might be guys that he rubs the wrong way. There might be reporters he rubs the wrong way. I'm not one of them, but he's very smart, too, about what he says. Everybody goes to him for quotes, but a lot of times he knows when to stop himself and when he wants to let loose. Very in control. He also he had a history of being really out of line on the field. Mm-hmm. And that hasn't popped up all that often, maybe once or twice, but I think he's matured in some ways, in the necessary ways, but there's still some of that old Richie Incognito that pokes out from time to time, but I think he's come a long way.
I think that, I can use this situation to shed light on a sensitive subject, as well as kind of put my best foot forward and show that I have grown and have learned from this situation. The spotlight's definitely going to be on me, no doubt. But all I can do is just keep working hard to show that I'm changed and to show that I'm willing to do what it takes to be a productive member of the Buffalo community.
The Bills at this point, they install a ping pong table in their locker room, and you see it when we go in there during media availability. He has fun with those guys and he cracks jokes and you can't. They're funny, and you're sitting there and you laugh, and then in the back of your mind, that little voice says, "That's the same guy from this scandal in Miami that allegedly led to a teammate to considering suicide." And you just go like, so that hasn't gone away for me. But yeah, I just think about Incognito in all of those terms that you said, Matt. Just like I don't know that he's any different, but he does know how to navigate better. With not only the media, but guys in the locker room.
I do want to add, I have had some fun X and O offensive line conversations with him. Like off camera, just, hey, I saw you do this, what were you thinking? And he's really been generous with, explaining about this and that. And I've really enjoyed that part of interacting with him.
One guy that Richie Incognito also gets along with in the locker room is now a new member of the Buffalo Bills on Tuesday, March 3rd, when the Bills trade Kiko Alonso to the Philadelphia Eagles for running back LeSean McCoy. Alonso didn't play in the 2014 season with a knee injury. McCoy has been in the league for a long time, a very productive player in the league for a long time, but, as a running back, you don't know how long his future will be. Your thoughts of that explosive move coming right on the verge of free agency?
Oh, couldn't be better. And as the Bills kind of explained, it kind of fell in their lap. There was a talk about, the Bills went out and marketed the linebacker that they wanted to get rid of. Kiko wasn't as good as Nigel Bradham. That's why they didn't trade. If the Eagles had called and asked for any Bills linebacker for LeSean McCoy, the Bills are going to be happy to send him away, whether it be Bradham or Preston Brown or whoever it was. And it happened to be Kiko Alonso, which was fine. It was a definite upgrade, and we've talked about how the Bills always seem to find themselves a running back. This was another one, probably the best of that whole group. But you can't argue against that trade. It's a great deal.
Yeah, it was funny, the timing of it all, and they even came out and said, we were out on the boat, out on Terry's boat, and I'm thinking to myself, what were you doing on the boat? I mean, usually when one finds himself on a boat, usually alcoholic beverages are present. So I'm thinking, well.
Who among us?
Who among us hasn't made a blockbuster trade a few deep? But I mean, it was a blockbuster move. That's the only way to describe it. And the only hesitation I had with it, because we talked about Kiko Alonso and whether he was really the answer at linebacker. But I think the number one hesitation I had was, how's LeSean McCoy going to feel about this? And we found out, not hours after, that he was a little bit uncomfortable. He didn't like how Chip Kelly handled it. How happy was he going to be in Buffalo? And it wasn't so much the trade that I had an issue with. It was the immediate extension of his contract, where I thought, you don't have to convince this guy to come here. He's not a free agent. He's yours. And he has to play for you or sit out and lose money. So the idea of immediately giving into, here you go, LeSean, we want you here, for long term, instead of making him go out and kind of, play on the contract he had. That was the one thing where I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting. I don't know if he's going to like it. Coming to Buffalo after he spent his whole life in Pennsylvania.
The coach decided to move his direction. You got to respect it, and it's business. So I'm happy here. It's my new home. Like I said before, I'm going to give him 110%. And I want to win, and I want to have success and hopefully get that main goal.
It was hard to argue, especially, Fred Jackson getting older, C.J. Spiller being a free agent. They needed a running back, and he was a huge upgrade.
Yeah, 5 days later after the trade, the Bills and McCoy agree on a 5-year, $40 million contract, $26.5 guaranteed. And you mentioned C.J. Spiller. As that trade goes down on NFL Network at the exact same time is C.J. Spiller just sitting in on an interview. And it was just an incredible couple minutes of awkward television as C.J. learns live on TV that he's no longer in the Bills' future. He said that the Bills thanked him for his service. Just the thought that, since Thurman Thomas, the Bills have been looking for a steady solution at running back, and they've had multiple ones. We've talked about them over these last 16 episodes. Just the thought that McCoy's the guy, and Spiller now joins the list along with Lynch and McGahee and Henry and so many others.
It wasn't, I don't know where to go with this, because it was such an easy move to make. I mean, the Bills, they said they got a call, and you can kind of imagine, like Matt's saying, they're probably a few deep. Like, hey, Chip Kelly wants to give us LeSean. I mean, how could it not have been anything like that? So this was an easy choice, except for, and Matt's completely right, the contract did not make any sense. But I wonder, and I want to ask you this, if they don't give him the deal, how much more angst do we get from LeSean McCoy? Because we saw it firsthand when they played the Eagles that season, what LeSean McCoy does with someone he's not happy with. So if he comes to Buffalo and they say, you're ours, you're going to play under our terms whether you like it or not, would we have even seen him in training camp week 1? What would that have been like?
Yeah, he was not in a good place when the trade went down. He was not happy at all, and that's probably underselling it. Like, he was extremely upset, and how could he not be? I mean, I know he's going to play for Rex, and everybody loves playing for Rex, but he's going to Buffalo, where they don't win, and he's still on the same deal. And I think that deal did help matters, and I think, when you're the Bills, you have to do stuff like that. You don't get Mario Williams in free agency if you don't give him a little extra money, give him a little extra financial incentive. And the same thing goes for LeSean McCoy. He still wasn't all that happy when he got to Buffalo. Like, let's make that much clear. New contract or not, he was still a little bit salty. But I think now he is extremely happy. I've never seen him happier in Buffalo than he is right now. And he still has a lot left in the tank. And so that makes you think, that just makes the move look all that much better. The contract is still going to be an issue for the market at that position, but it was the type of move that took the first step in repairing that relationship. Not that it was the Bills' fault. They didn't do anything. It was more, he was really upset at Chip Kelly and really, I think, just depressed about leaving home for the first time. But he definitely, I think, appreciated the money, and how could he not? It was quite a chunk of change.
Yeah, seriously, $26.5 million guaranteed. This next note from free agency in 2015 was something that I passed over when I was doing research for this. I only had to go back and be like, wait, when did they do this move? March 12th, the Bills signed Tyrod Taylor. And, you know, a backup quarterback for Joe Flacco in Baltimore. I didn't have really any expectations because I really didn't know much about him other than, you know, he was at Virginia Tech, but he'd been a backup. And just, fellas, your thoughts as this guy, Tyrod Taylor, kind of a question mark, an unknown guy. Is coming into Buffalo seemingly to compete with EJ and whoever may be coming down the road.
The Bills had no one. So I had a lot of talk from fans. People in Rochester would come to me and say, what do you think of Tyrod? Is he maybe the guy? Is this maybe? And, you know, as a career backup who had next to no reputation as anybody with an ability, you kind of looked at it at first blush as, all right, they're just bringing someone in to run around and be a camp body. And then I got so many questions, I actually went and looked at his one NFL start before coming to Buffalo. He played a meaningless Week 17 game against Pittsburgh. He looked, frankly, like a really fast version of EJ Manuel. He was terrible as a thrower, passes not on time, not accurate, not reading defenses, but boy, was he fast. And I said, well, all right, we'll see how this works. I never thought, I spent the whole spring and summer telling people he's got no chance to be the starter.
It was really interesting. I do remember that move, and it seemed like a footnote of free agency. You know, we signed this guy and this guy. I think he had his
They had already
conference
traded
call.
for Castle, too.
They had traded for Castle, and they had the conference call was Tyrod Taylor and somebody else they had signed, another sort of nondescript player. But I remember the conference call distinctly because the way Tyrod spoke, he said, I am coming here to compete. And leaving, if he was coming to be a backup, he could have done that in Baltimore. Denver was interested in him. There was a lot of other stuff around Tyrod Taylor that made me think, okay, maybe he has a shot. But I do also remember thinking, Doug Whaley spent a first-round pick on EJ Manuel. They just traded for Matt Castle. They have the least amount invested in Tyrod Taylor. So if he wants to win this job, he has to go and get it. But they did say three-way competition, and didn't it feel like in the spring and early in the summer that they weren't giving him a chance to win the job. He was getting fewer reps, and all the talk was about EJ and Castle and all this, but the more we watched him, the more comfortable he got, and the more you looked at EJ and Matt Castle and said, these guys are nothing. Why not go with a more exciting, guy with more potential? But it's just really funny how you mentioned all the questions from fans and all the excitement as he got going in training camp in the preseason. It's just so funny how quickly in the NFL we go from, oh, what about that guy? What about that guy? And then you see him in the regular season, and he's all of a sudden like the object of all this criticism from fans. He goes from intriguing to, oh, he's not a franchise guy really quickly in this whole deal. But I think it was a really interesting move, and the way it developed throughout the summer was fascinating to watch.
And the Bills' free agency period, Tyrod Taylor is kind of a footnote because so many things happen. You have Incognito, you have LeSean McCoy, Kyle Williams and Jerry Hughes get new contracts, and the Bills go out and sign Charles Clay and Percy Harvin. So there are big names that the Bills are bringing in, seemingly one right after the other. And I just remember in that 2015 offseason that, I remember the day that they signed Tyrod Taylor. It just happened to be a day I anchored, and it was just a line. It wasn't a story. It wasn't anything. It was like, oh, yeah, and the Bills signed this quarterback.
The Bills making news as well. They have signed Ravens backup quarterback Tyrod Taylor, athletic QB who can move quickly. He's been Joe Flacco's backup for the past 4 seasons. That's not all for the team. A check of our Buffalo Blitz. Bills also re-signed wide receiver and special teams gunner Marcus Easley. Was the Bills' 4th-round pick from the 2010 draft, a real solid special teams player, one of the best in the NFL. Battled a heart condition that ended his 2011 season, a real inspirational story for Easley to make it this far. Today, rewarded with a new contract for a reported $7 million over 4 seasons.
Rex had all this talent on defense, all this talent on offense, other than quarterback. I think they wanted Matt Castle to come and just not screw it up. Rex had the experience with Sanchez, with being a turnover machine, having to go with red, yellow, green wristbands on when to take chances with passes and stuff like that. They wanted someone to come in and just not get in the way of what they were going to do everywhere else. And then I think one of the more underrated stories that summer, I think Matt Castle really fell out of favor in the summertime. In OTAs and minicamp. By the time he got to training camp, I think the coaching staff realized that they had to make it, whatever plans they had to make that a legit open 3-way competition because Castle had lost a step on his fastball.
Yeah, he never really had too much mustard on that fastball. And it was interesting because, like I said, Doug Whaley was in EJ's corner. Greg Roman was in Matt Castle's corner. But Rex, running the team, said, let's open this thing up. And I think Rex had always been a Tyrod guy, and he was the one who was, really intrigued by Tyrod and wanted to bring him in. And so, if not for Rex, I don't think Tyrod gets a fair shot at that job, to be honest. And if Doug Marrone is still the coach, I don't think that's a move that they make.
Yeah, I don't think he's even in Buffalo if Rex wasn't there.
And to be honest, I mean, you can make an argument he's the best quarterback they've had since Jim Kelly under center, or maybe since Doug Flutie would be more accurate. Drew Bledsoe would be in the conversation, but he was definitely an upgrade over what they had. And it was good that they made it a three-way competition because, like you said, Castle did not look good. And by one of the last preseason game, he wasn't even getting too many reps in that game. And so it was obvious that he was not the answer, and that if they wanted him to be the guy, that they were going to be really fighting an uphill battle. He wasn't even at a Mark Sanchez rookie level to me. I thought he didn't look good at all. It was the competition seemed to almost bring out the worst in EJ at times during camp. He had some moments, but he didn't look good. And Tyrod just really rose to the occasion. And I thought it was a really impressive summer from him. And I think a lot of credit goes in that moment to Rex Ryan for recognizing that it needed to be an open competition. He needed a fair shot, and he let the best man win, which was refreshing because that doesn't always happen in the NFL.
Moving forward, the 2015 NFL draft may be the most irrelevant draft that the Bills have over the course of the drought because they don't have a first-round pick because of the Sammy Watkins trade. That is pick 19. Cam Irving, a center, goes to Cleveland. The Bills' first pick is pick 50. Ronald Darby, cornerback out of Florida State. John Miller is the third-round pick. Their fourth-round pick also goes to Cleveland. They draft Carlos Williams in the fifth round, and then you have guys like Tony Stewart, Nick O'Leary, and Des Lewis to round out the draft. And I just remember leaving Orchard Park at the end of the 2015 draft and okay, I'm sure. There was nothing that moved the needle, nothing that made you think like, oh, this guy's going to be particularly good or particularly bad. It was kind of a meh grade at the time, and looking back, Darby's had some moments, Miller as well. But, nothing too impressive with the 2015 draft.
I thought that was kind of a down-the-road draft, and they were kind of forced into it without having a first and a fourth. To me, I thought the Bills drafted Darby as a replacement for Leodis McKelvin the next year when McKelvin's contract came up. That's what was my first thought there.
A physical, not only with the ball, against ball carriers, but as a press guy, and Rex is a big press guy. His physical attributes, height, weight, and obviously blazing speed. The production wasn't that high this year, but he also wasn't challenged that much this year. Corners, you can never have too much. Unfortunately, the last 2 years, our corners we've had to deal with injury problems. So having another guy in there it makes you feel secure with what Rex likes to do on the defensive side of the ball.
And we talked about what they needed a guard. John Miller just made sense. They were dead at that position. They had to sign someone and draft someone. I didn't know at the time if he'd be any good, but from a positional point of view, they hit needs, one current and one I thought a year away.
Yeah, that was an interesting draft, kind of a downer of a draft, because there's no first-round pick. It was a bad quarterback group after the top two, Mariota and Winston, and so they kind of lucked out in the fact that they gave up their pick in a year that they wouldn't have been able to get a quarterback anyways. The one big picture takeaway I had from that group was a lot of off-the-field stuff that they let slide. Ronald Darby was with Jameis Winston the night he was accused of raping a woman at Florida State. Carlos Williams was tied to a few different off-the-field incidents that were rather serious. And so they let a lot of stuff slide. And that was my big takeaway because Doug Whaley didn't really have a good answer for it other than, we checked these guys out. They didn't even bring Ronald Darby in for an interview, if I recall. And, asking Doug Whaley where he drew the line, he said, stealing from a teammate was the thing that he couldn't let slide. And so you had, Ronald Darby, who was tied to some weird stuff, Carlos Williams, who was, tied to a drug deal and accused of beating the mother of his first two children. He ended up having more children with another woman.
We had him in. He explained everything. He's been cleared. He's fine. I think we feel very comfortable we did our work on him.
It's a growing pain. I had a great support system with friends and family who had my back through the whole process. And, it's things you learn from, things you can and cannot do, things you learn to do better, things you learn not to do all the time. And you learn how to control your emotions and stuff like that.
But stealing from a teammate was where the line was drawn, and that was also the Lyle Collins.
I was going to ask you about that.
And after the draft, Rex went down to Baton Rouge and made a sort of a full court press on him because that was really weird. Right before the draft, he was, investigated for murder. Or was a suspect, and it ended up being nonsense, and he ended up getting cleared, but he slid all the way out of the draft. He was a guy that could have been in play in the first round, and all of a sudden, like you said, they needed offensive line help kind of all over the place, and all of a sudden he's available for cheap, and Rex Ryan, master recruiter, is going down to try to get him. I remember being really intrigued by that, and I remember thinking, well, whatever he was involved with, he wasn't stealing from a teammate, so
he's good.
Go on and get you some, Rex.
Yeah,
and,
I know.
And it didn't work out, but that was my big takeaway. Was I started slowly realizing very few things were off limits to Rex Ryan and Doug Whaley, and as things materialized in the summer, we got more reminders of that.
Sure did.
Now, News 8 Sports with sports director John Kutchko.
Less than 3 weeks before training camp begins at St. John Fisher, what's supposed to be quiet time for NFL teams. Instead, we wake up to news of a Bills coach getting arrested for punching a kid. It tops our Buffalo Blitz. 48-year-old offensive line coach Aaron Cromer was charged in Walton County, Florida, near Panama City, early this morning on a misdemeanor battery after an altercation with 3 boys there. The incident centered around the use of beach chairs, if you can believe that. A police report indicates Cromer threw one of the boys' fishing poles into the water, pushed one of the boys to the ground, punched him in the face, and threatened to kill his family. This is footage from our station in Panama City from the beachfront property where all of this allegedly occurred. The Bills acknowledging they are gathering more information.
Wow, that was quite a story to wake up to.
I was stunned he kept his job after that, to be honest. I thought that he was going to be done. It seemed like one of the dumbest things for someone in the public spotlight. And this isn't some longtime assistant coach. This is a guy that had been a coordinator in the league, had held positions of stature in the NFL. To be involved in something like this seemed like you don't want this guy on your team. You don't want someone that stupid on your coaching staff, especially when you get Richie Incognito in his position group. So I was surprised he kept his job.
Yeah, I was a little surprised he kept his job. I imagine they were not pleased to wake up to that story. I certainly wasn't. It was my last day of vacation, and I had to work. But it was just, like you said, so stupid. Yeah. I mean, just read the headline. Aaron Cromer was in a fight with 3 boys over beach chairs. I mean, this is a grown man, and he's threatening to kill people's families, allegedly. And, and they did go to the police. Charges got dropped. He lucked out. He got suspended and all that. But it did feel real. Like I said, you got more reminders just when you thought you forgot maybe that Rex would let anything slide. He gave you another reminder, and Aaron Cromer was one, and that was not the last that summer either.
What the heck is a coaching suspension, by the way? How do you suspend it? Like, you can't talk to the guys,
Yeah,
you're not in the building. I mean, I don't know.
That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, a couple days later, the Bills placed Cromer on indefinite paid leave.
Good work if you can get it.
Yeah, I know, right? So, and then fast forwarding into training camp, and this was a turbulent training camp, only superseded by the following training camp in 2016, which had a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, right at the start of training camp, July 31st, Aaron Cromer has his charges dropped as a settlement is reached. The Bills suspend Cromer for the first 6 games of the 2015 season.
LeSean McCoy made quite the stir last week when he posted on Instagram a flyer for an upcoming party he was throwing. Ladies only, 21 and over, RSVP by email. News of the party spread like wildfire. He later took the flyer down. Today, Shady McCoy talked about the party that could only be described as shady.
No, I canceled it. It got too wild. I feel like everybody took it out of context, so I just canceled it.
I did not get an invite. I'm a little disappointed about that, but maybe next year.
We didn't really talk about it. And on a serious note, it was just, I feel like it was like a thing I do every year with just teammates. It's something I bring together with teammates, but I didn't do it this year. It got too wild. I should never posted it. I'll take blame for that. But for the record, there was no weird thing going on. It was just a regular, one of my guys in my camp actually posted it, so we had to talk with him, and we all make mistakes. I didn't think it was that serious, but I could see where people can take it the wrong way.
So Bills training camp is now off and running. Don't know if we'll get another press conference quite like that one.
You also have at the start of training camp, I forgot about this, the Dog Biscuit Challenge. And just, you talk about like the circus being around the Buffalo Bills, watching the head coach, the owner, and Marcel Darius enjoying dog biscuits off the field.
These are a little small. I said lap band size. So here we go. I have no idea on the flavor. Oh, that's terrific. I'm gonna get one more, I think. Yeah, that's outstanding. A little dry. Okay.
It's not that big of a thing, but it was just like, just play football. Please, let's just make this a football team. I remember coming away with that feeling at that time.
The Rex part didn't surprise me. Terry Pagula eating a dog biscuit, you had to wonder if going through his mind as he's chomping on that biscuit, like, why have I brought myself to this? Is Rex Ryan worth me in front of cameras, you know, playing the part of a household pet?
I don't know, boss. That wasn't me, because I like my job.
I take my own?
Yeah, I think you should.
Huh?
Yep.
They are dry. So I have to challenge somebody?
Yes, you do.
Let me think.
These are hard to get down, aren't they?
I'm going to challenge, because he's like a dog on a bone, Marcel Darius.
All right, there you have it.
So that was the only part. The Rex stuff didn't surprise me one bit. Marcel, you know, even he was a playful enough guy, fine. Terry Pagula eating dog biscuits just blew my mind.
Yeah, Rex made things so strange and so busy. You're sitting, because after camp, you're juggling a lot of things. You either got to go get a player or, you know, Rex is going at the same time doing his press conference, and you could never miss Rex because it seemed like when things would slow down, he would get anxious and he would have to do something to bring it back to him. And I know that's part of his style, take the attention away from the players by calling attention to himself, but I was actually surprised at how quickly it got old. And I found it got old, I don't know, 2 weeks into camp, maybe not even, because you don't realize it when you're in the distance and he's doing it in New York and you see random headlines and you're like, what a goofball, it must be great to cover him. But when it's every day, like you said, you're just like, really? Like, we're doing this again? Like,
CA Dog Biscuit Challenge.
I'm accepting Terry Pagula's SPCA Dog Biscuit Challenge. That's
Eat
kind
it.
of a lot to say.
And then challenge whoever you want to. Let me slide out here.
You might need to remind me what I'm just supposed to say. I'm accepting Terry Pagula's SPCA Dog Biscuit Challenge. Now just eat it, right?
Eat it.
Down ahead. This is really, really dry. Insanely dry. And I'm going to challenge Kyle Williams.
Could have done better timing. Come on over, Doc.
Roll Tide.
Come on over, Doc. Excuse me. You might need to eat a dog biscuit.
I thought you said I was going somewhere else. I'm not eating a dog biscuit. He just
Just challenged you. He just challenged you.
I don't care. I challenged him to a match of golf. Who cares? I mean, what do he eat? I'll eat what he ate.
Eat a dog biscuit. We'll have to get another one.
Okay. As long as it's a Snickers bar dog biscuit, I'll eat it. That's what y'all wanted to ask me about?
Yeah, he just challenged you.
Okay. Well, I can't do nothing. I don't have a dog biscuit.
I went to school in Long Island. I know a lot of guys who cover the Jets, and I talked to them, you know, give me the Rex preview, and they all despised it. I mean, just hated every minute of the jokes and the garbage and just the stupid stuff he had to cover. And I had the same reaction as you. Really? This is not, because we had Doug Marrone and Dick Duran and people like, exactly. You know, we're like, this isn't fun, but that's exactly what they said.
Yeah, and then Tuesday, August 11th, the fun, oh man, it continues. Yeah, the Bills released their first depth chart, and yeah, they say that Castle, Taylor, and Manuel are all the #1 quarterback on the depth chart. But down in Florham Park, is that where the Jets have their facilities?
Yes.
A dispute arises between quarterback Geno Smith and one IK Enemkpali, punches Geno in the face over $600 plane ticket, breaking Geno Smith's jaw. And I remember when that news came out, and happened to be after a Bills practice during training camp. And the setup at Fisher, you know, there's a little cafeteria where the media and some of the volunteers have their lunch. and it's separate from the players' cafeteria, but the players' cafeteria is past the media cafeteria, so you have to walk by it. And I remember sitting in the media cafeteria, like looking at my phone, like, oh my God, what is going on down with the Jets? And Rex walks in with a smile from ear to ear. Now, maybe the two are not connected, but man, it sure looked like Rex was like, I can't believe what's happening. And this is after an offseason where Rex has talked about the Jets at every moment he had an opportunity to talk about how he felt jilted by them and that they did him wrong by letting him go and not giving him a team that could produce. Well, now you see that the controversy is still continuing in the Meadowlands with the Jets, and now here's IK Enemkpali a day later joining the Buffalo Bills after breaking Geno Smith's jaw.
It couldn't have been more perfect. You know, Rex had been accused of the guy who couldn't keep control, who was the circus, and now the Jets apparently were having their own circus without him. So maybe it wasn't Rex. I mean, for all the things that we have talked about that have happened with the Bills, there was no stealing from teammates, and there were no teammates punching each other. So Rex could saunter around.
That.
Exactly. Like, look at me. It's not me. It's the team. I separated myself from the problem. I'm not the problem.
Yeah, that was a really interesting 24 hours because from the moment it broke, you thought, oh no. Like, is Rex really going to do this? Mm-hmm. Is he really going to do this? And, you know, that was a busy 24 hours because you're working thinking, you know, everybody's on that story nationally. Like I said earlier, they're a national story. The Jets are always a national story, so that happens. And immediately I think everybody went, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. Jets cut IK, seemed like, what, an hour later.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden everybody just turned their attention north. Well, Rex, your move. And he did not disappoint. I mean, there were rumblings of it the night before, and then sure enough, they claim him on waivers. And I just remember that was the moment for me when I said, this is going to get out of control. It already had trended that way, and there were ideas, but you wanted to give the guy a chance. That was the moment, and I wrote it at the time. It was the first time I really went after Rex because it felt like they had given him way too much power. And he had scores to settle, and he just wasn't entirely focused on the task at hand, building a winner. He had a lot, like you said, a lot of leftover emotions about that Jets ending, and it just felt like that wouldn't have happened if he wasn't here. IK Enemkpali probably isn't worth it. He's taking a lot of chances. He's bringing a lot of guys into this locker room, and it just felt like they gave him way too much power, and he had not earned it. And that move to me, he didn't have a very good explanation. Doug Whaley didn't have a very good explanation because how do you explain that one? Rex basically explained it as like, you know, whatever. This is my team, and you know, guys get second chances.
Yeah, there's a guy that made a mistake.
Right. Who are you guys to judge? And
you think that's the first fight that's ever happened in an NFL locker room?
And my thought was, Rex, you have the number 4 defense in the league that had over 50 sacks last year. You do not need IK Enemkpali. I know you want to roll him out there as an honorary captain to rub it in Geno's face. Geno didn't fire you. You know, it was just an odd move. And now, you know, you're sitting there, and now IK Enemkpali has to face all these questions and be, again, a national figure. Rex couldn't even pull that attention away from him. And so then you just knew you were waiting for that game because you knew IK was going to stay on the roster at least until then, and he was going to get rolled out there. It was just, you didn't need him at all on the field. The team was set at pass rusher. He was not necessary. At that moment, I thought, this guy's an idiot, and he's out of control, and who knows what's going to happen next. It also was the first move, I think, that brought into question who's calling the shots here. Because, again, we talked to Doug Whaley after that, and Doug said, you know, Rex said he wanted him, and so I went out and got him type of thing. And that's when you realized, okay, Doug Whaley's Rex's personal errand boy at this point, and this is going to be a really interesting situation as it starts to unfold.
Yeah, and I just remember the day they claim him. It might not have actually been the same day, but when IK met the media for the first time, he walked out, delivered a prepared statement, and I just remember standing on the field at St. John Fisher, and it was, you know, me, a couple other camera guys, and a couple reporters, and thinking, this is the biggest storyline in the National Football League, and it's happening on this practice field at St. John Fisher College in Pittsford, New York, and there's like 12 people here.
There weren't that many people there at all because the night before, being about an hour away, I always debate, whether to go back and forth. And usually when there's an off day, I go back to Buffalo. And there was an off day, and I, talking to the PR people, like, should I leave? And they're like, probably not. And so I was there. There weren't many people there, though. And it was the same thing as the Aaron Cromer deal, where Aaron Cromer came out, gave a 30-second statement, and walked away, and you had no chance to ask him questions. Same thing for IK Enemkpali. And again, a weird spot for IK to be in, but he kind of put himself there by punching someone, and he was probably fortunate to be employed at that point.
How y'all doing? I want to thank everybody for being here today. I want to apologize to the Jets organization, the fans, my teammates, and the coaches. I apologize for what happened. Should have never happened. I should have walked away from the situation. It was never my intentions to hurt anybody. I'm just very grateful for Rex Ryan and the Buffalo Bills organization for giving me an opportunity to further my career here in 2015. I'm very grateful and thankful and happy to be a Bill. I look forward to being a good teammate, an accountable player, and accountable teammate to this organization. And just happy to be here and thankful. Thank you.
And again, not a guy that was squeaky clean before that happened. Let's make that clear.
Forgot about that story.
It was not his first mistake off the field, punching Geno Smith. So, again, a weird thing, like you said, biggest story in the National Football League, and there's 12 is probably generous. I think there might have been fewer than 10 people there. It was Rochester people and then maybe 1 or 2 Buffalo people, because people didn't have time to get back and forth. They did it on short notice, like, hey, IK is going to be talking over there.
In like 25 minutes.
And I was like, luckily I was sitting in the dorm room, 10 feet away. But what a weird, like you said, a weird moment to sit there and think, what is happening?
Yep.
And in this little corner of upstate New York that otherwise nobody would be paying attention to, now everybody's paying attention to it. I guess the Pagulas got what they wanted in a weird way. People are paying attention to their team, but for a lot of the wrong reasons.
Yeah, all of the wrong reasons, really. And then the injury bug starts hitting the Bills, too, as LeSean McCoy tweaks his hamstring during practice. And, Thad, you were at that practice session at St. John Fisher. And, McCoy, the guy that they traded for, a guy that got that big contract, a guy who's been in the headlines for the things he said about Chip Kelly, he can't even get through his first training camp without tweaking a hamstring.
Play happened right in front of me. It was a red zone drill. He went out for a pass and went up for reception, came down awkwardly and was on the hamstring right away. And, there were already questions about whether or not he could play 16 games. He had, not really been the kind of guy you could depend on to do that. And, here we go. This is, Buffalo being Buffalo. They have this great trade fall into their lap, and the guy can't stay healthy. It wasn't a shock, but it turned out to be not super serious.
Yeah, it was one of those things that followed him a little bit, but it was one of those oh no moments at training camp, because that's really all training camp provides, isn't it? You're sitting there watching. There was Sammy Watkins' rookie year where he's making all these big catches, and there's some sizzle, but
and
usually
Taylor is putting himself on the map too.
He sure is, but there's also, it seems like in training camp you're just holding your breath, hoping you're not going to get one of those oh no moments, and that was about as big a one as you could get. I believe that was during the Browns joint practices.
I don't think so.
Because it was right after.
Because he re-aggravated. He had something happen during the Browns practices, but then it was afterwards that he had the more serious hamstring problem. But because he had a few other things he was dealing with, it was nicks and bruises, and that's part of why we talk about the contract. Is running backs are prone to injury, getting the ball as much as they do. So that was the first hold your breath moment, and you started to realize how fragile the whole operation was, because it was resting on the soft tissues of one player. And that's when you started to realize, oh boy, like if things start to, if you guys get hurt, they're in trouble.
Yeah, and then right after that, almost right on the heels of that, on Monday, August 31st, after they've left training camp, the Bills released Fred Jackson, the oldest running back in the NFL. But to your point, they're resting their hopes on a guy's hamstrings that are, seemingly up in the air. And a backup, a serviceable backup, is now no longer with the team. And, Fred Jackson, it's long documented everything he's meant for Western New York, both on the field and off the field. But I remember that day. That was a day where I felt fans were already turning on Rex and the Whaley hierarchy of the Buffalo Bills, because Fred Jackson for better or worse, was a hero for so many people in Western New York, and they just let him go.
It's a great point to make because it definitely felt that way. That whatever. There was still optimism because the Bills had talent, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and Rex was a guy that had gotten teams to the playoffs. But this move made very few Bills fans happy, especially because no one really realized that Carlos Williams could be the guy he ended up being that one season. Like Matt has said, LeSean McCoy was not trustworthy. So from a football point of view, I hated the move because I didn't buy into Carlos Williams at the time. And then the off-the-field stuff just exacerbated it.
This is probably the toughest day I've had since I've been here as a coach. And the decisions that go into things, it's not always apples to apples. But, in fairness to Fred, it's probably the best case scenario is that he was released today. Gives him an opportunity to look elsewhere.
It becomes bigger than football. You spend 10 years together. You have families the same age. You spend time together. You really live life together. So that's especially what makes it tough.
Nobody has guaranteed a spot. So if nobody has an eye-opener for that, you think in this business you have a guaranteed spot? Well, today just proved to you that you don't.
It was also really interesting, if you recall, because there was a report from Tim Graham that Doug Whaley had gone rogue in making the move.
Oh, that's right, yes.
And so it was really interesting that, again, especially with the benefit of hindsight, you started to see, okay, when they bring in Richie and when they bring in Tyrod, who eventually becomes the starter, and they get Percy Harvin, it's all Rex. But when they do something that's unpopular, who was the one that had to go out and answer questions? It was Doug Whaley.
Sure was.
Went out and he was in the statement, and then he went behind the microphone, and there was the reports that he had gone rogue. I remember tracking him down in Detroit, trying to get some clarity on that. And it was like he was being blamed. It's like if you want to blame someone, blame Doug Whaley. And, oh, yeah, all that good stuff that's happening, that's Rex.
He's been the heart and soul of the Buffalo Bills for a long time. He's a tremendous person, not only on the field, but what him and his family have done in the community. We tip our hat to that. And again, this is not a decision we came through lightly, but we've made this decision, and it's a tough decision, and we'll go from there. Hate cutting somebody and telling them that we don't want you to be a part of our organization, but a guy with that stature, it was a very emotional conversation.
For Fred, it was Doug Whaley. That's when I was like, what a weird time this is with this football team. And Rex was not going to be treated the same way he was in New York, where John Idzik, would pull moves. It was obvious where leaks were coming from at the time, and for Doug Whaley to have to take the fall for that, I don't know that it was the worst football move in the world either, because Fred didn't have a whole lot left in the tank, as he proved. He did latch on in Seattle, but it was just funny that it was almost like Doug Whaley's up there, with a heavy heart, explaining this move.
And he said
was
that they
very
were
emotional.
crying and all that.
And even Fred, I think, blamed Doug Whaley.
Oh, yeah, still
Afterwards said I never felt like I could trust Doug Whaley, and that's who he blamed. And I remember just thinking, man, like, that was one of those times where it was rough to be Doug Whaley, because he gets all of the blame for a move that actually I thought made a little bit of sense, because if LeSean McCoy gets hurt, you're kind of screwed anyways. So I don't know. It was just one of those things that, again, gave you some clues as to how things were going to be structured.
Yeah, it was definitely a turbulent training camp. And then right on the eve of the season...
We're still not done?
Oh, because everything happens with this stupid team. So that's what we should call Down and Drought the next time we do this. On Thursday, September 10th, the Bills and Marcel Darius agree on a 6-year, $100 million extension. And we talked about Darius and his off-the-field problems, but a great player when he's seems really motivated. And he's still suspended for week 1 of the 2015 season because of the drug arrest from the prior year. The thought that after all that turbulence with Darius, and though he can still be a great player, they're going to give him a 6-year, $100 million contract with $60 million guaranteed.
Better be right. Be right about him. Be right that he has turned himself around. I mean, there was reason to believe that could go okay for them, but good luck to you guys. I mean, that's the only reaction I had to that.
Yeah, it was another example, kind of like the McCoy deal, where it felt like they were appeasing the player when they didn't necessarily have to. He probably needed to appease them and prove to them more than they made him do it. They just gave him this big contract, and that was it. There were some rumblings during camp that he was getting frustrated with their offers and things of that nature, and then all of a sudden they just hand over the money and make him a very, very wealthy man. We find out later on that that money did not void when he was suspended again. That was written into the contract. Nice move by his agent. Hat tip to him, but not good for the Bills, in writing up these contracts. And all of a sudden they have tons of guaranteed money committed to a defensive line. That's very good, but you're putting all your money there. God forbid they ever find a quarterback, they won't even be able to pay him. And they started, structuring their roster in an interesting way. Again, nothing against Darius as a player because he's phenomenal when he's focused and motivated. Those times have become few and farther between as he's gotten more money, but it was another incidence of, why are you doing this now? Why not make him earn it? They picked their spots curiously when it came to doing that.
Yeah, well, even with all of those question marks going into the 2015 season, Week 1 is a terrific day for the Buffalo Bills. So you could take all those question marks and say, well, look at the results. The Bills go out in Week 1. They knock around the Indianapolis Colts, who were in the AFC Championship game the year prior. They win 27-14. Tyrod Taylor's the starter, though not technically for this game because Matt Castle plays the first snap of the game. Just what an unbelievable season. But I remember Tyrod has that 51-yard touchdown to Percy Harvin right at the start of the game, and I wasn't at this game, but I just remember watching and thinking, okay, well, after an insane offseason with very few positive moments, here's a great one to start the year.
Rex had a history with the Jets of being able to get them up maybe once or twice a season to win a game you didn't think they could win. They beat Drew Brees in a bad year. They beat the Patriots a few times. I thought this was going to be that game for the Bills. I just thought with all the hype, and despite all the things we've talked about that have gone dumb in training camp, there was still as much optimism as, again, I can never remember during the drought. Rex was going to channel all of that and get his team fired up, and he was just going to attack, a Colts team that, as it turned out, probably like the Bears a couple years earlier, wasn't as good as we thought they were Week 1. So I was not surprised by this win at all. I was impressed by the way the defense just made Andrew Luck's life miserable, and then we never saw that defense again.
It was funny because that game really, really stands out as one of the craziest games I've covered since I've been on the beat. And I was a little bit surprised, if I'm being honest, that they came out after that training camp and just smacked Andrew Luck around. Andrew Luck was everybody's fantasy quarterback, right? Everybody was loading, daily fantasy, everybody was saying, Andrew Luck, T.Y. Hilton, load up on the Colts because they're going to shred that secondary. Mm-hmm. Ronald Darby looked really bad during training camp, and it looked like they had a huge weakness on that side. Darius was going to be out with the suspension. I just remember a lot of people loading up on Colts in fantasy. That stands out to me. And for them to dominate the way they did, I remember thinking this team might not, because Rex has always been inconsistent, right? That's sort of, his teams have always been inconsistent. But I remember thinking this team's going to be fun because we never know what we're going to get on any given Sunday. And they're going to be able to compete with some of the best teams because, like you said, he'll randomly get his team fired up to play like it's the Super Bowl, and that's how they treated that game. And you want to talk about peak optimism? It might not be, if it wasn't heading into 2015, the peak optimism of the drought had to have been after they beat the Colts.
I said it last time, I'm going to say it again. If they're sleeping on us, they're going to have nightmares. Bang!
You prepare and plan, all week and really all off season, all training camp for this one game that you're getting ready for. So yeah, it feels good. It feels good to win a home opener against a really good football team.
Message is clear. What I think about this football team, the personnel that we have here, the organization. We feel great about this team, and like I said, we also feel the responsibility not to let our fans down.
I think we showed how special we could be. Especially as an offensive unit, the defense played well, and they've been playing well for years. The offense is very explosive, and we have a chance to be very special.
After they beat the Colts, everybody thought they were going to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah.
They thought this is it, and that next week, that Patriots game was bedlam in Orchard Park. People were really excited in the week leading up. It was, this is it. Rex has turned us into a contender, and finally, Bills fans felt like they had a team that could go toe-to-toe with Tom Brady, and boy, were they wrong.
Yeah, whoops. Yeah, Bills led 24-0 to start that game against Indianapolis. And then in the lead-up to that Patriots game in Week 2, of course, Rex versus Belichick, well documented. I remember being home at the start of that Bills Wednesday, media day for the Buffalo Bills that week. And Rex Ryan's entire press conference was live on SportsCenter. And in the years I had covered the team, believe me, that had never happened. And I can't imagine the last time that had ever happened with the Bills, where a full press conference was aired live on SportsCenter in the morning. And yeah, that optimism could not have been higher. And Rex Ryan, comes in, years after saying, I'm not going to kiss Bills rings and all that. And now you have the setup is so perfect for Rex and the Bills versus Belichick and the Patriots. And of course, the game did not go in the Bills' favor.
Well, and a big part of that was, I thought, the way Rex played defense. He just, after against the Colts, he'd attack. They backed off. They spent the whole game against New England trying to, kind of play catch, play prevent defense with them, and Brady took them apart. But to your point about the ESPN televising the press conference, over the 17 years I've covered this team, I've thought many times about how, oh, look, there's Ed Werder in Dallas. Oh, there's Sal Paolantonio in Philadelphia. Oh, there's this guy from NFL Network, in Philadelphia. They never come to Buffalo.
Never.
I've never seen these people. Michael Irvin came one time that I saw. I mean, never do the Bills.
They come when the storyline's the other team. It's never the Bills.
Yes.
Yeah.
And never anytime after Thanksgiving.
Nope.
Never even after Halloween. It's the Bills play in the NFL, but they are in a league by themselves, and it's not a league that anybody wants to be a part of.
I mean, I'd have to go back and look at the schedule for that week, but that was arguably the game of the week. That was a showdown of epic proportions. People actually, nationally even, especially locally, but nationally thought, let's see what this Bills team's made of. And I was hesitant after the Colts game. I was like, knowing Rex's history, but I just remember thinking, all right, we'll see against New England, because that's the ultimate test, and they got it early. The week leading up to that game will always stand out to me. There was the Bills shop putting front and center the ball pumps.
Oh my God, I forgot
to poke
about
fun at Deflategate. There was obviously Rex's press conference being this national thing. There was the Bills fans trying to break the Guinness Book of World Record for the loudest stadium.
That's right.
And I remember thinking, the Bills were very hesitant to pump that and endorse that, because they know with the Ralph being such an open place that it's very hard. You can't trap the crowd noise the way Seattle and Kansas City do. And I just remember thinking, man, people are fired up for this game. They're poking the bear, so to speak, in Belichick. And Belichick was the same as he's ever been. Staying there, just saying, it's another Sunday. And,
we're on to Buffalo.
Yeah, we're just going to go, and, Rex has a good team, great defense, and we're just going to try to go out and play good ball. And I remember thinking, this is it. This is your chance to, at home, try to upend Tom Brady and prove that you can contend for a division. And it just didn't go from the get-go. I remember sitting in the crowd for the first couple of series, because I thought, if they're going to break the crowd noise record, this is when they're going to do it, and I want to hear what that sounds like. It didn't sound like they were breaking it, and they didn't. But they only had about 5 minutes where they were that excited, because that first drive, Tom Brady I think the first drive, they stopped him.
Well, the Bills, the first two drives were perfect. It was a 3-0 for New England, and then Buffalo walks down the field for a 7-0 lead.
And scores.
Yeah.
And then it was after that Tom Brady took the air out of the stadium. It was
Sure
just
did.
a methodical drive where he just picked the defense apart, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, man.
It wasn't
and
just
then
that,
I believe it was 3 and out.
It was the next 50 minutes of the game.
It was that first two series. Edelman had got stopped, but I think Darby squared him up. Darby was playing real well early in that year, and after that, it was just like everybody was just like, oh no, same old story, and it was the same old Patriots, and it looked a lot like the same old Bills.
There's a difference between coming out ready to go, fired up, ready to play, and coming out and being totally without poise, without focus, being, just a lot of stupid, idiotic stuff. And that plays right in their hands. If you have no poise, you have no focus, you get caught up in all the BS, that's what they do. And it plays right into their hands, and we did that.
It was 37-13 after 3 quarters. Yeah. So, I mean, it was...
The final score ended up
Bills
more
rallied
respectable.
Late, but it was total garbage.
It was deceiving when you go back and look at it, because they got smacked around same way they smacked the Colts around the week earlier.
It's 37-25, and the Patriots have the ball like the Buffalo 30 or whatever it is, and Jerry Hughes forces a fumble. The game was over.
It was over.
And then New England drops back on a 4th down play, and they get a turnover, and that makes the score look nice.
40-32 the final, but it was not an 8-point game by any means. Afterward, of course, Rex puts the loss entirely on himself, says, Belichick outcoached me.
True.
Correct.
We did a horse job, and it's my responsibility. Sometimes, it's an emotional game. You should play with emotion, but sometimes you let your emotions get the better of you, and it went to our detriment.
And it starts with me. I obviously have to control my emotions a little better, regardless of how bad things were going.
Aaron Williams also suffers a very scary neck injury in that game. And that was the first one that, and Aaron Williams has suffered multiple head injuries and neck injuries since then. It looked very innocuous. Did not seem like a big collision. I believe it was with, maybe it was Amendola or Edelman. Edelman, yeah. It goes to tackle Edelman as he's reaching for the end zone and just kind of hits his neck and his head oddly, and the next thing you know, they're bringing the ambulance out. Yeah. And Thad just being on the field for that game, you were there.
Yeah, it happened right in front of me.
Yeah.
Literally, like he was laying where you are right now,
yeah,
in front of me on the field. And like you said, it looked like your typical receiver dives for the pylon and a defensive back goes head first, shoulder first, whatever, to try and stop him. But when the smoke cleared and the pile, everybody else got up, Aaron Williams stayed on the ground. And that's where you knew that this would be a serious thing. And again, with them going at each other shoulder to shoulder, head to head, it was one of those things where, all right, it doesn't look bad, but let's make sure everybody gets up. Oh, Aaron Williams not getting up. Okay, this is probably bad then.
Yeah, an ambulance coming out, is your first sign that something serious is happening. And that's a very important player to the Bills on and off the field. And obviously it set into motion a series of injuries that have jeopardized Aaron's career. But that was a scary moment for sure. And the handling of it in the aftermath, I thought, was very sketchy as well. And they didn't handle it well at all. And it was just, they came out of that game losers in a lot of ways. And, with the injuries and just the final score, you just felt walking into that locker room like they were starting to wonder if they were for real. And that was 2 weeks into the season. Mm-hmm. So that was a tough game in a lot of ways.
Yeah, Brady went for 466 in that game, which is nuts. And then the underrated part of the Aaron Williams injury is that Rex's defenses were always very complicated at the back end. He brought Jim Leonard with him from Baltimore to the Jets to kind of quarterback the secondary, and they didn't do that in Buffalo. And I always wondered about that move. I think Aaron Williams was in a large part the quarterback of that secondary. You take him out week 2, now you've got Corey Graham trying to coordinate things with rookies and young guys back there. I think it was a big reason why they were decimated the rest of the season.
Yeah, I know, you weren't at that game, but I remember watching the Aaron Williams injury and thinking to Kevin Everett. And just, how scary that was also right at the start of the season. And, just the silence that, takes over Ralph Wilson Stadium. Just Thad to cover the Kevin Everett story. And then now, a few years down the road, you have another sort of similar circumstance, obviously not as life-threatening, but you didn't know that at the time with Aaron Williams.
I think Aaron Williams was moving around, not comfortably, but was moving around to where I don't think the Kevin Everett comparison ever came to my head. The ambulance certainly, made you think that a little bit. But if I remember correctly, he was on the ground, not still. He was rolling around a little bit and to the where you didn't think paralysis or that kind of injury. But obviously, the ambulance comes out and all bets are off.
Yeah, and you still, I feel like in the aftermath, you got a sense from the team, sort of from Aaron Williams, tweeting out messages, but you got this sense that, and maybe it was because Kevin Everett was so bad and that was such a scary situation for more reasons than football, that Aaron Williams' injury didn't seem as serious, and so it kind of got that treatment in a way, right? Oh, he's, this isn't Kevin Everett. Well, it's still his neck, and he's still a safety playing football. And I think that gave a false sense of security, maybe to the team, maybe to Aaron himself, and it made the aftermath, it made seeing him on a football field again feel very weird.
Sure did.
Because
and it wasn't even a month later.
It was really, really quickly afterwards. And just the way everything has gone for him since then makes you think that was too soon.
Transitioning to another player, this time on the offensive side, Matt Castle is traded to Dallas. So it is full systems go with Tyrod Taylor, and I guess EJ is the backup. I remember the Castle trade was met with pretty split amongst people that liked it and people that didn't. The Bills got a the Bills traded Castle and a 7th to Dallas for a 5th round pick. Just your thoughts on Castle. Yeah, he didn't make it work in Buffalo.
No, he was never in question for being the starter. Tyrod was the starter. This was all about the backup. And, this felt like another Doug Whaley power play move because, he had been EJ's guy. or EJ had been his guy, and he wanted to make sure that EJ remained relevant on the team as the number one backup. And I think maybe to save a roster spot, that might have been there too. I don't remember what the rest of the depth chart was. But I didn't like the move at the time. Didn't turn out to make a difference. I don't think either one of those guys would have been any good, so at least they got something for Castle.
Yeah, I was indifferent for the most part. I know there was the backstory of perhaps Doug Whaley's making another power play. Perhaps he's going rogue.
Again. Yes, again.
You know, Doug Whaley, the rogue agent, running around making all these wild moves, like cutting Fred Jackson and trading an over-the-hill, never-was quarterback in Matt Castle. It was a little bit of a power play. Like, he wanted his guy to be the backup. He thought he was ready. I mean, geez, he should be ready. He was a first-round pick, and he started a few years earlier. But I just think Matt Castle was so bad when he was here, and he was so bad when he went to Dallas, that it was one of those trades that I just kind of shrugged my shoulders at and thought, well, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't good. And so EJ wasn't good. It felt like the offense was going to operate one way if Tyrod Taylor was healthy, and it was going to operate a completely different way if he wasn't, and that other different way was not going to be pretty.
Yeah, and then week 3, the Bills go on the road to Miami. It's the weekend where the elbow room came into our lives down in Miami. This game could not have gone any better for the Buffalo Bills, so that the bad taste from the New England game is totally gone, because the Bills come out and they smack around the Dolphins. 27-0 at halftime, Dolphins home opener. Dolphins are booed off the field. Joe Philbin gets fired soon after this game. But yeah, Carlos Williams has the touchdown. Charles Clay, against his former team, scores right at the start of the game. LeSean McCoy has a really nice touchdown in this one as well. Bills win 41-14, and the Dolphins fans are out of the stadium by the fourth quarter, and it felt like Orchard Park had moved into Florida as Rex is like pumping up the crowd, and Richie Incognito's like cheering, also taking on his former team. He's like shouting along with the Bills fans, and it's such an up and down start to the year. A great win against Indy, bad loss versus New England, and they come back and smack around the Dolphins.
Funny thing about this is that the amount of optimism, and granted, what Matt said about after the Colts game being an all-time high is certainly very plausible. There was not nearly the happy thought about, oh, good, they won a road game, a road division game, great. But there was we just got pounded by New England again. Yeah. No one bought into the Bills at 2-1 after this Miami game. Especially not like they did against the Colts.
Yeah, it was so hard to get excited if you're a Bills fan, because you had seen what had happened the week earlier. And I just feel like ever since I've been here, Bills fans measure themselves against New England, which is probably extremely unhealthy to do to everybody out there. But it just felt like people were like, well, it's the Dolphins. We knew we would be better than the Dolphins. The Dolphins aren't very good. I thought it was fairly encouraging, because you wonder how a team responds. Like I said, going into that locker room on that Sunday and even that Monday after the Patriots, it was like, man, there's a different feeling here than there was a week earlier when everybody was John and talking about gunning after the Patriots and things. For them to come out on the road in a place that traditionally has not been kind to them and do what they did to the Dolphins, it was impressive in a way. But like I said, the optimism was never going to reach the fever pitch that it did, before that in New England.
As you seen last week, of course, the game didn't go like we wanted to go. But towards the end of that game, you could see the fight that this team has in it. And we continue to keep fighting.
And then in the following week, the Bills host the New York Giants, and the Bills just lay an egg in this one. They're banged up. No Aaron Williams, no LeSean McCoy, no Sammy Watkins because of a calf injury. But, the Giants win 24-10. There was no feel to that game. I remember being on the field for that one. There was just really nothing that happened in this one. Bills hit for 13 penalties in this game, and that was I remember thinking like, oh man, the penalty thing became a storyline with the Bills throughout this season and into 2016 as well, and it really shows in this Giants game in Week 4. But then Week 5, the Bills go on the road to Tennessee, and Tyrod Taylor had some impressive performances, but the way he led the Bills back in that Week 5 game in Tennessee, I think really put him on the map, even though it's a bad Titans team. But scoring 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to lead a comeback against the Titans, against Mike Mularkey, who is, I believe, oh no, he wasn't in the interim yet. They still had Ken Wisenhunt. But Bills win 14-13. Taylor gets hurt in that game, but the Bills come back and win.
Great comeback, but to me, I looked at those Giants and Titans games and said, this is a bad sign for the Bills offense. There were so many 3-and-outs. Each game, there were halves where the Bills offense were completely non-functional. And yeah, like you said, a bad Tennessee team. Tyrod had a 3rd and 28,000 scramble for a first down and then had another rushing touchdown. This did not look like sustainable offense to me in the NFL.
The leadership definitely comes from me. Being the quarterback and on the field, they got to see confidence in every play that I call, the way that I feel, the way that I show my emotions throughout the game. So my main thing is that I just keep everybody uplifted. It's a long game, and whether we're doing good, we have to maintain that. But if we're doing bad, we have to pick it up. So they definitely look to me for encouragement, and I have to be that person.
Great. I mean, they were 3-2, and Tyrod had a couple plays to pull a game out, but I was not impressed with the offense.
Yeah, that was a big moment for Tyrod because he got hurt and fought through it. It wasn't he came out injured on the last play or whatever. He got hurt. It was his knee, and he fought through it. And he fought through it with his legs. He was making these miracle plays. He put the offense entirely on his back and made a great comeback, albeit against a tire fire of a Titans team. But it was still impressive that when things were going so poorly, Tyrod was able to make that happen. And it was one of those games where you said, that wouldn't have happened with EJ or Matt Castle. Or a lot of quarterbacks really in the NFL, and because he was dealing with a pretty beat up offense, including himself, and he carried the team, but he came out really beat up. And like you said, sustainability became a question. How often can Tyrod Taylor do that and stay healthy? How often can he pull that out of his hat against better teams? It started to call into question some stuff about this team, because if you have to do that to beat the Titans, I know it's on the road, but the Titans were not good that year. They were quite bad.
Yeah, Mariota's rookie year.
Yeah, Mariota's rookie year, so they are coming off having a very high draft pick. And it just was not – were they on their way to getting the #1 pick that year even? That they traded to the Rams, correct?
It would have been, yeah. It would have been, yeah.
For Goff.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
They were on their way to getting the #1 pick. So not an impressive Titans team that the Bills beat, but a good performance from Tyrod. Still one we were pointing to in 2016 when we're thinking, how many times has Tyrod led the team back in the fourth quarter? The Titans game was his shining moment, and it still kind of is. And it was a good game, but it left some question marks lingering.
Yeah, for sure. And Taylor comes out of that game with a sprained MCL. Also in the aftermath of that game, I remember Aaron Williams shouting to me on the field. I had the camera on him as he was coming off.
That's a great roll man right there. That's what we need. Get back on track.
And then thinking like, wow, it's kind of a miracle seeing him on the field after what he went through. Then 2 days later, the Bills placed him on IR, and he's done for the season. And just the Aaron Williams thing in 2015, who knows if Aaron will ever admit to whatever happened or walk through those few weeks. But to see that injury, then have him come back and then like, nope, you're done. Like, just what is this team doing at this moment with their players when they're banged up, when they're hurt? Whether it's a Bud Carpenter thing or a Rex Ryan thing, who knows? But I just remember being very puzzled by Aaron Williams and him being on the field after that injury.
It seemed to be going on for a long time. Injuries seem to be a problem for this team more so than others. I don't know if it's because the Bills never overcome them and win games, but it does seem to be a continuing issue with the Bills.
With Aaron, too, it couldn't have been second, third play from scrimmage on defense. He made what looked to me like a really nondescript play. Guy was heading towards the sidelines, and Aaron went over and hit him. And Aaron came out for a play or two and looked, it wasn't as big of a collision as the one that caused the initial injury. And he was, shaken up a little bit, but then he popped back in. And that was when I was like, first of all, you were like, why is he playing so quickly? At first you thought, great sign, what a miracle. And then he came out and went back in, and you're like, what's going on? And afterwards in the locker room, he was walking around real gingerly and, had ice on the neck, and you're just thinking, if your neck is an issue, it's one thing if you're fighting through your knee, your shoulder. Guys do that a lot. Fighting through your neck, you got to be pretty smart. And it didn't feel like the Bills or Aaron, whoever it was, we may never know, somebody wasn't being very smart.
Between this injury, the way this was handled, the way Sammy Watkins was handled the next year, they have made 2 monster injury handling gaffes with important players in Rex's 2 seasons. Yeah,
and you mentioned a Sammy Watkins injury. Well, he gets injured in the following week, in Week 6. Tyrod Taylor doesn't start because of the MCL injury he sustained in Tennessee. EJ Manuel under center against the Bengals and has a poor throw to Sammy Watkins for a touchdown. Watkins catches it. Crowd goes crazy, and then Watkins is holding his foot and his ankle, and he's done for the game, suffers an ankle injury. Yeah, I mean, the foot, the ankle has been a recurring thing with Sammy Watkins now pretty much since this injury in 2015. The fact that you spent a first-round pick on E.J. Manuel, then you spent 2 on Sammy Watkins, and you've benched the QB, and now the guy you drafted and traded a pick for is on the shelf.
Looked nasty, too. I mean, looked really bad. Like, he would be out for a long time. And that was not a game that you would say take him out because the game was over, but the Bills had no chance of winning that. Cincinnati was a machine that year. They looked so good in that football game. It was unfortunate that it happened at the end, but it was just another of the litany of things that have happened to Sammy Watkins since the moment he came to Buffalo.
If I remember, that pass was fairly inaccurate.
It was?
I feel pretty safe in saying that. Because
you would be correct, sir.
Because of who was throwing it. Sammy was pretty open.
Wide open.
And EJ threw it behind him, and Sammy kind of had to awkwardly go back, and that's why he hurt himself.
I don't think it was, I'd have to look at it to see. I think it wasn't so much that it was, I think EJ put the ball where it had to be put, but he threw it like a second and a half late, to where if you throw it on time, then it's easy pitching.
Because he was stopping to come back. It allowed a defensive back to sort of catch up, and he should have just caught it, and it should have been an easy touchdown, 6 points for fantasy owners. But instead, it was, he had to bend over, and he got hit by a Bengal defensive back, and you're right, it did look ugly. And that was another injury they had to deal with, and I believe this was the game where they also had an injury to Kyle Williams, and I believe I remember this being a Chantrell Henderson injury where it was either Chantrell or it was Cordy, because I believe that was the debut of one Cyrus Kouandjio.
Oh, I wasn't at this game, so I don't know. You might be correct on that one.
I believe in the second half, somebody got hurt, and they plugged in Cyrus Kouandjio because
might have been both guys.
It might have been both. It was one or the other or both, and because Cyrus was on top of the world heading into London, which was the next week. And so a lot of injuries, as you mentioned, and Rex did not hesitate to use that as a crutch. Of course. He said, I'm not one to make excuses, but we've had a lot of injuries.
I think the thing that is killing me right now is, it's frustrating. Injuries are part of the game. There's no question about it. But it's like we've been so snake bit. It's just unbelievable.
I'm not using it as an excuse, but let me point out, we've had a lot of injuries.
Yeah, so Kyle Williams suffers a knee injury and is done for the season in that game, in that Week 6 loss, 34-21 to the Bengals. As soon as the game ends, everybody jumps on a plane and they head over to England. Thad, Matt, you guys were both there. The lead up in England, and then to cover a game at Wembley, just walking through that week.
Crazy thrill. Unbelievable. For us, we went to the Bengals game, and from there got on a plane in Buffalo and flew right out. So we didn't come back and do anything else. We're right out to London, and just seeing the history, being first time I'd been to England. You walk around every corner and that building was built in 1311. That building's from the 11th century. It was unbelievable. And then the funny thing about where the Bills set up and practiced, it was like an hour outside of town. So you had to get on a shuttle. We'd all get on the same shuttle together and take this hour and 15-minute ride out to practice. And they stayed in this 17th century country estate with gardens outside and a major golf course around the corner. And it was, everything was unique and different. This was like no other football practice game team I'd ever covered. And it was a whole lot of fun to be a part of. I consider myself very, very lucky to cover that game.
All the taxi drivers I talked to and Uber drivers, it was like shocked because not many people stay out here, so it was like a big deal to them that we stayed at the Grove. So it was massive. It was big. It looked like it meant something. It looked like something that millionaires and billionaires to go to.
Well, isn't that where you guys are?
Yes.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I know a lot of people on the outside say, man, what a job. You get to go to London and just, run around for a week following the Bills. And yes, as you said, we're very lucky that we get to do that. It was very busy too, because as you mentioned, they were an hour outside of town. You were kind of running all over the place trying to keep up with everything. And they were trying to have a regular week of practice, which was pretty challenging given where they were practicing. And like you said, these guys are trying to check out the city too, and they're an hour outside of town. They're taking Ubers in and out and what have you. I can understand why teams are hesitant about wanting to play over there. And the whole question gets brought in of, will there ever be a team there? Logistically, it's very difficult. We took a red-eye flight on Tuesday. I think their first practice was Wednesday. Mike Rodak from ESPN and me, we were on a red-eye flight and got there. It was in the morning in London, and we took a cab to get out to where the Bills were practicing. And
I'm sure that cab was affordable too.
Yeah, it was a busy, busy week. It was also a really strange week for the Bills. It would have been a interesting week
in Buffalo.
Because EJ was starting. So you had EJ at the podium and all these London scribes sitting there asking, getting their taste of American football, and it's EJ Manuel up at the podium. And there was Percy Harvin drama to follow that week as he was, mulling retirement apparently, and all sorts of stuff going on. It would have been an interesting week anywhere. You almost wish there was less news to follow so that we could have, bummed around the city a little bit more. But like you said, what a thrill to be there and experience such a unique thing that, again, the Bills were on a national stage and an international stage. And so it was a cool week.
Yeah, the circus travels across the pond, and not only, the issues with the Bills in terms of, those storylines, but also the team they're facing has their former head coach. And so now Doug Marrone versus the Bills in London with EJ Manuel starting. And I try to remember, Doug was never available during that week. Did anybody catch up with him over that week in England?
No, they don't make
not even in Jacksonville, I don't think. Obviously, there were many requests to Jaguars PR, but I don't think in Jacksonville they even made him available. And he stayed pretty hidden throughout the week. Again, you couldn't really go to both practices because the Jaguars were all over the place. It was hard to keep up, but
plus the Jags had done this game 3 or 4 times already,
right.
So they don't get
this
into
was
town
like their second home.
Yeah, they come into town on Friday or Thursday at the earliest, so they weren't really available. And like I said, it wasn't like you had your own car to where I'm gonna go here because I feel like doing this at this time. You were pretty much at the mercy of whenever you were traveled or had time to do whatever.
But I remember being on the pitch, if you will, at Wembley. Kind of stalking him out. Like, he has to come out here to warm up with his guys. He was out there very briefly. I believe Mike Rodak did catch up with him, off the record briefly just to, talk to him. But nobody really pinned him down in terms of the major storyline of him facing his old team. He bolted off the field. That was another thing. I was like, maybe I can catch him coming off the field. He bolted off and snuck out. He was slippery that week, as he tends to be.
Even in pregame, he stayed as far away from cameras as possible, didn't interact. A lot of times, ex-coaches will go see the guys that he used to work with on the other team, say hello, shake hands. He was in a corner of the stadium the whole pregame, didn't talk to anybody, just kind of kept to himself.
He was out there briefly on the field, which, he let his guys run their warm-ups. Usually those coaches are out there for a decent amount of time. Not St. Doug.
Yeah. And it's funny, just kind of the way the practices goes before a game starts. They're, the line are typically in the end zone because you want to have more of the field available to the quarterbacks and wide receivers. So you can be, the distance between you and me from an offensive line coach for minutes at a time during warm-ups. And to have Doug, in hiding at massive Wembley Stadium must have just been like, really, Doug? Like, you're afraid of this? Like, come on, man. Just face the music and just get it over with. But then the game itself with EJ Manuel as the quarterback, and whew, boy, it gets ugly real fast. Let's just go through this real quickly at the start of the second quarter. 14:09 left in the first half. Blake Bortles to Allen Robinson for a 10-yard touchdown. 12:30 to go in the first half. EJ Manuel strip sack fumble. Aaron Colvin returns it for a 6-yard touchdown. The very next play, 9 seconds later, Manuel a pick six to Telvin Smith. Then 2 minutes later, Manuel throws an interception. I remember watching this because, again, the game was at 9:30 in the morning here on the East Coast because of the 5-hour time difference. I think it was 9:30, correct? Mm-hmm. And so, that was a painful few minutes for one EJ Manuel, and can only imagine what it was like in Wembley. I can tell you on this side of the pond, there's just the expletives were flying everywhere on social media.
Could only laugh at it. I mean,
that too.
There was still a large group of Bills fans who just were, EJ is going to figure it out. He's going to be the guy, and he's going to lead us to victory. And, I could only shake my head and laugh at, look, we've been telling you this is who EJ is for weeks and months. And look, there it is for you all in about 5 minutes of time.
I don't think I necessarily cost the team the game. I know 2 early plays and those plays for touchdowns that they scored on hurt our team. And I don't think necessarily one play changed the game for us.
We all stand right by them. We just kept encouraging them and believing in them and believing in the guys. And we knew we could come back. And and we did. And it's just, man, I really thought that game was going to be ours.
I take a lot on my shoulders, to be honest with you. I'm not going to sit up here and say, oh, it's a team, this and that. I feel like, I have to do a better job, as a quarterback. And obviously, you take these things, you learn from it, you watch the tape, and you move on, you be a man about it. But for me right now, personally, it's going to be tough.
After the game, Jim Kelly was the first one to greet Manuel in the tunnel, offering what appeared to be words of encouragement. For Bills fans, the most encouraging thing they can hear 2 weeks from today when Miami comes to the Ralph is that Tyrod Taylor is healthy and ready to play. At Wembley Stadium in London with your Buffalo Blitz, I'm Thad Brown.
That happened, and it was really good fuel to the fire, which was, albeit a small fire, of we should have kept Matt Castle as our backup. He at least wouldn't be doing this. Well, go back and look, anybody who still thinks that, because later that night, I remember having dinner in England, and Matt Castle actually got thrown into action for the Cowboys and did basically the same thing. He was, I think he threw multiple pick sixes in that game, threw a bunch of interceptions. So it was like,
three interceptions, one was run back. He did. I mean,
it was bad.
The same
it wasn't quite as bad, but it was. Right. Yeah, well, they were the same guy
in the ballpark. For sure.
He was really bad too. But EJ was exceptionally bad. I just remember. I mean, it was a great atmosphere for a game, and I think everybody in there, oddly enough, was entertained by the, mayhem that was happening on the field. It was an open air press box. Which is uncommon. I don't know that anywhere else in the NFL has that. There are others that have the option to open it up, but that one is strict open air, and it wasn't warm. It wasn't a balmy fall day in England. It was like 50, and so it was kind of chilly. I remember having my coat on for a lot of the game, but the crowd was so loud. It was almost like they were just enjoying the chaos that was unfolding. And man, things could not have been going much worse for the Bills.
Yeah, how could you not enjoy that because that's the thing about these NFL games in London is that almost in the same way like the Toronto series is that they're not necessarily fans from one team or the other. They're just football fans, and they're there to take in the show. And so you see, jerseys from every team in the NFL, and now you're watching a quarterback being fed to the Lions, or in this case, the Jaguars. EJ Manuel just had a 5-minute stretch that, I don't know that anyone could match that. I mean, that was as bad as it gets, but Manuel leads a comeback in this game. The Bills have a chance late, but the Jaguars go on to win 34-31. I believe LeSean McCoy suffers a concussion in this game, if I recall correctly. At the end of the first half. Just a wild game as you eat breakfast while watching the Bills.
Well, then you talk about feeding the fuel of the Matt Castle, angst. The EJ supporters, despite the disastrous 21-point, 5 minutes, they have the lead late in the game. And if it had been for the defense, giving up a Blake Bortles late touchdown, they wouldn't have won the game. And the EJ fans have been like, look, even though he did all that bad stuff, they still won the game. So we came out with all of that. And this was also the time when the defense rebelling on Rex was happening too. So to lose that game with the defense folding late and allowing a touchdown drive to Blake Bortles, there was fuel for so many fires that you couldn't figure out which one to start putting out first.
Yeah, it was wild because Bortles was not good down the stretch in that game, and it seemed like the defense had sort of figured him out. In the first half, he got all these short fields and was cleaning up EJ's mess, essentially, and he started to crumble, and all of a sudden, like you said, the Bills have the lead. The defense, all they had to do was stop him, and he marched them down the field with ease. The defense looked terrible, and I remember one thing from post-game asking Stephon Gilmore, about going up against Allen Robinson, and because he was on the rise at that time, his star was shining, and he had 10 for 100 or something like that, scored a touchdown, and Stephon Gilmore said, yeah, he was average. He's average. He's not that hard to go against, and in typical Stephon fashion, and the Bills were lacking on accountability afterwards. They were pointing the finger at the refs, as I recall. There was a questionable pass interference. There always seems to be a questionable pass interference, especially during the Rex Ryan years, because every call that goes against him is questionable. I believe that was on Nickel Roby, and he was, also quite honest after the game when discussing that, and he was probably right, but they also had ample other opportunities to stop those guys.
The call today was terrible. I don't see where the contact was made or where any of that was made. I asked him what I did. He couldn't explain what he did. I mean the call. He couldn't explain the call. I asked him what I do. He couldn't explain it.
Calls like that I just don't see all the time in the league. Just 3rd and 17, and and a pass interference, the way they called it, and we all saw it, and it's just a funny call. So it is what it is.
They were able to get themselves in a position where they could have escaped all that EJ Manuel mess, and the defense all of a sudden started to become a story because you said, what in the world is happening with this defense? We thought Rex Ryan would be, the perfect match for this attack-style defense that the Bills already had, and now it was just a complete mess.
We found a way to get out. We found a way to keep fighting and found a way to come back, and not only come back, but to come all the way back and take the lead. That's the thing that it just kills you right now.
It's like getting the carpet snatched off and under you. It's just a bad feeling. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and it just sends you home thinking it's a long ride home, and nobody wants to go back with this on their minds.
Yeah, the Bills have given up 34 points in back-to-back games, and this was also at the time when the communication issues were becoming an issue with the Bills defense, and penalties, of course, as well. Bills go into the bye after the London game. Week 9, they host the Miami Dolphins. The Bills just, again, beat the stuffing out of the Dolphins, winning 33-17, but that sets up a Thursday night affair in Week 10 on November 12th. In the Meadowlands, Rex versus the Jets once again. This was a national TV game on CBS, and just a great shot right before the start of the game. CBS is doing their pregame show, and you see all of the camera guys and the reporters too standing by the tunnel, just waiting like sharks in the water for Rex Ryan to come out for the first time in the Meadowlands as head coach of the Bills.
I was there.
You sure were.
We waited the whole. Usually I have all these things I want to get. I want to get the backup quarterback and the other team's running back, and Bill's doing this.
Coordinators.
Exactly. Blew it all off to stand by the tunnel for the entire pregame, and Rex never showed up. Rex never. Yeah. Even when he's not on the field, it's still about Rex.
He said, I'm not. Afterwards, he said, I didn't want to make it about me.
And there were laughs.
Yeah, you don't want to make this game about you. You've only been talking about the Jets since January, since your opening press conference. And like you said, even when it's not about Rex, it's about Rex. Yeah. You thought hiding in the locker room, like you never do, would make people think it's just any other game. You're treating this like any other game, except you never do that.
Right.
And it just made the build-up even greater. It was like WWE.
It really was.
Like everybody standing there, cameras out, cell phones out, waiting for Rex to walk through. It made his entrance all the more grand. He was soaking every last bit of it in. It was almost nauseating, but it gave football fans, that was the idea of Thursday Night Football, right?
Yeah.
Give them a break during the week. It was like Thursday Night SmackDown or whatever they call it.
Yeah,
WWE.
it is. Yeah.
And that's what it was. It was Rex versus the Jets, Rex versus Woody, Rex versus John Idzik. It was a complete circus.
Well, and that's the thing I don't get is what would Rex think? What would he think would happen if he just walks out? People get the shot, and he walks out on the field and just does the pregame.
And we're not talking about it right now, years later. But we remember that he didn't come out.
Yeah.
And he knows that. He's not stupid.
This game, as you guys made it all about me, and that's why I stayed in. Because as Jack do about me.
He is a performer, and he was a performer on that night. I mean, that was so typical. Not to mention IK Enemkpali is a captain.
Yep,
I mean, there's just it was, and the whole build up to that game was all about Rex versus the Jets. Oh, this isn't about me. Yes, it is.
Because there's nothing to talk about, you can only print what I say. I think I'd like to focus on Clemson.
We know it's about you. We know it's about IK. We know it's about the whole mess. And he tried to play coy, but everybody knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah, and what were your thoughts, fellas? Just, because Richie Incognito was the captain against Miami the week prior, and now IK's the captain for the Bills against the Jets. Just of Rex doing that move, because you really don't see that in the NFL. And not that it's honorary captain. Can anybody name an honorary captain from any other game ever? But it only is because Rex, does this thing to jab at whoever the opponent is.
This goes all the way back to the Santonio Holmes issue when he was playing for the Jets, and he got into the fight at the end of the season in his own huddle. I think he was a captain that year, and the question was, well, why is he a captain? Is that what you want for leadership? The Rex next season said, the heck with it, I'm just not going to have any captains. And then the captaincy, the coin toss just became a joke. Whatever guys he wanted to run out because he thought it was hilarious is who he would run out. So at that point, by the time we were fast forwarding to 2015, it was just what Rex did. Yeah, it was silly and stupid, but it was Rex, and part of the circus was that.
It was always guys playing against their former team, guys playing in their old hometown. I believe Chris Hogan was a captain for that game because he grew up in New Jersey. That was sort of his thing, and that's why he was able to say, because everybody's asking him about IK, and he's like, is he going to be a captain on Thursday? And Rex was like, you'll have to tune in to find out. It was the whole
show.
Right. It was part of the show. He was an entertainer. It might as well have been reality TV when he was here, and that game was the biggest example. And he always did that. He always had to, and to his credit, I guess he did always do that. There were former Dolphins captains during the Dolphins game, and Richie was a captain for that game. But the IK thing, it felt like so much buildup because in my mind it was like, okay, this guy was on the roster for this moment.
But a little shocked, to be honest with you, that so much is made of IK being the guy. I don't get everything. But I'm not going to change how we do things. It's something that I've always done, and that'll never change.
Yeah, it was so bizarre. And the Bills go out and they win on national television 22-17. And, of course, because it's Rex Ryan and it's not about Rex, CBS, of course, keeps the postgame show going so that they can get Rex's presser on television. And Rex comes out. This was during the Color Rush game, so he's got his red sweater on.
It doesn't feel that good. Hell yeah, how do you think it feels? They ain't right. It feels great.
And it's just so bizarre.
I ain't the smartest cat of all time, but I spent 6 years, coaching the green and white. And so you kind of get it that way. But, hell, I look out there and my team's in red, So, blue, I might have had a chance. But I'm like, who are these? Oh, shoot, that's us. But so it's different. By the way, the red looks pretty cool. I might go with that instead of the blue one.
He's talking about, how the Jets are like a girl you break up with, and we've all been there, fellas, and they call you back, but they can't get you back. And just like, oh my God, Rex.
And you know what? Now I can talk the truth and say the truth. This thing's kind of like, I look at it this way. It's kind of like being dumped by some girl that you had the hots for and all that stuff. And like, and you guys can equate, like every guy in the room has been dumped by some girl before. That's really what it feels like, And, hey, you move on. And every now and then they call you back. They can't get you back.
This is so nauseating, and yet at the same time, just incredible television.
To sum that up, Bills fans were never at their highest than after the Colts game. I think Rex's highest moment was when they had finally sewn this win up on national TV Thursday night.
100%, and they were in the hunt at that point. The
Bills.
Proverbial in the hunt.
5-4.
The Jets were good at that time, and they were on their way to a decent season, and they were looking pretty good. Todd Bowles had them clicking pretty good. I remember the moment that they won because it became a GIF that lived on years later of Rex just because Rex being, you just looked at his quotes from all week, right? This isn't about me, this isn't about me. And then after they win, he has the huge fist bump. He's mother effing everybody and, that will listen.
Yeah, the wrong team showed up.
He barges into the post-game press conference, chest out. It's a tiny little room at the Meadowlands. Yes. And he's calling out Vic Carucci, he's calling out guys in New York. You doubted me, this, and that.
For some reason, I don't understand why the papers don't, recognize your coach, not the one that used to coach here. I'm on the front page and all that stuff, and I love that, but it's like, really? Yeah, I'm still smiling too, New York Post.
Rex, let's just for a second pump the brakes. You're still what? They were 5-4 at the time. Like, you didn't win the Super Bowl. I know you think you did. It was, like I said, it was Thursday Night SmackDown. Yeah. And he came in and he grabbed the microphone
delivered a promo.
Delivered a promo and was like, yeah, see you at WrestleMania, basically, is what it was. And I just remember thinking, like, my God, this guy is losing his mind. He was so excited, which, fine, he beat his former team and to Rex's credit, he never hid how he felt, but man, he was fired up and nobody was stopping. I mean, I can't even imagine being the PR guy for Rex, as he's just probably stiff-arming you, get out of my way, and just, like you said, they were in red. It was a very ugly uniform, and man, he was pumped. That was about as entertaining as Rex got.
Yeah, and then the following week, the Bills have a Monday night game, so back-to-back national games for the Buffalo Bills, this time in Foxborough against the New England Patriots, and yeah, there's no juice for this game, even though, you know, it is Rex versus the Patriots, but Tom Brady's Tom Brady. The Bills did keep him in check for most of that game, but Brady still throws for 277 yards and a score. McKelvin fumbles a punt against the Patriots. Where have we seen that before? Tyrod Taylor even has a chance to lead a fourth quarter comeback, but can't lead the Bills out of their own half in the fourth quarter as the Patriots win 20-13 to drop the Bills to 5-5.
Ugly game. Just
sure
hard to watch.
Yeah, I was there for that one. It was brutal.
Yeah, and it was worse on TV. It was, you can believe that. It was just not fun, not good. I mean, the Bills' defense looked better than it had the last few weeks, which was a positive, but you never got the sense they were going to win that game. You never got the sense that it was ever going to be anything that was appetizing to the eyes, and you were just happy when it was over.
Yeah, the defense played very well, and Rex had a much better plan than he did the first time against Tom Brady. The first time it felt like he was scared to do anything. He probably read all of those headlines and said, oh yeah, well, watch this, and came after him with the blitz. And it worked for the most part. Tom still managed to stay, you know, mistake-free for the most part. And,
he had one pick.
And you know, went, you know, about his business. I believe that pick was at the end of the half. It didn't mean a whole lot. And he just, you know, got the job done. And it was when the questions started rising about Tyrod Taylor, because he had a chance with the ball in his hand to beat the Patriots on the road on Monday Night Football and make a pretty big statement. And of course, it's not all on him, but the offense came up really flat when the Bills needed it most. And as high as Rex was the week earlier, he was awfully dejected. And again, boo-hoo, blaming himself and the whole deal at Gillette on Monday night. He was pretty sad.
Like always, you know, I've come up short many times, you know, being here where you think you got them by the ropes, but at the end of the day, they find ways to win. And that's what championship teams do. And we're not at that level right now, but I can promise you one thing, we're going to work our tails off to get there.
Patriots win 20-13. So the Bills 5-5. The following week, right at the end of November, week 12 in Kansas City, rained, was miserable. Talk about a game that was ugly to watch. Yeah, as the Bills take on the Chiefs. Thad, you were there for that one. Sammy Watkins has 158 yards receiving, all in the first half, and a couple great touchdowns in that game as well. But the Chiefs come back and win 30-22. Rex Ryan was really put under the spotlight in this game.
Worst weather I've ever covered like a Bills game in. Now, there have been some bad games I've gotten out of, but for me, that was the worst ever. It just never stopped. It never stopped. You couldn't do anything. You couldn't keep your camera lens clean. You couldn't keep it functioning for the most part. And then in terms of the game itself, Sammy Watkins was uncoverable for the first 30 minutes. And then, you know, I remember looking back on this game on film, I spent the second half wondering, why didn't they throw him the ball? And the Chiefs did a little bit of differences with their coverage and stuff, but the Bills just, they had something that Kansas City could not stop, and they never went back to it after halftime.
Yeah, it was odd. It wasn't that he got shut down. It was that they stopped going to him.
Yes.
I don't know how many targets he had, but it wasn't a lot in the second half. They didn't throw it to him a lot, and afterwards, Sammy Watkins the next day said, you know, the clouds and stuff, you know, really got the Bills down in the dumps, and that was part of the reason why they went into the tank in the second half. I remember thinking, is he really blaming the weather? I mean, Sammy Watkins is an odd dude, but that was a new one. But that game, to me, that was on Rex. And we talked about it before. You know, I don't know if you have it in the notes, but I counted in that game at least 5 times where he messed up on challenge calls. Now, he only gets 2 challenges. He blew both of those, and then there were other times where he should have been using his challenges. Jeremy Maclin caught a touchdown that he should have thrown the flag, and he didn't. Then he was throwing it at other. He kept it in his pocket for a while and then threw it at a really strange time. And that was part of his problem as a head coach, was making those decisions, and he screwed up huge in that game, and it cost them because that was a close game down the stretch where they again had a chance, and it just didn't work.
We're out of mulligans. Let's put it that way. We've got to take care of our business. We have to win this game, you know, coming up. But until we start focusing there, we've got to focus on this game and learn from, you know,
what the mistakes were that we made, and we've got to get them fixed. If not, you're going to see them again.
Yeah, Chiefs go on to win 30-22. The Bills drop to 5-6, but they're still in the hunt. They can still make the playoffs somehow. The following week, they take on the Houston Texans, and Matt Mulligan has his one shining moment for the Buffalo Bills, opening up Charles Clay for a 40-yard touchdown with under 2 minutes to go on that one as the Bills win 30-21. But week 14, the Bills go back on the road, this time to Philadelphia. So it's LeSean McCoy versus Chip Kelly week.
In an interview with ESPN back in May, LeSean McCoy said that he never felt comfortable with his former head coach in Philadelphia, Chip Kelly, and that Kelly, quote, got rid of all the good black players. This week, McCoy still stands by those comments. Chip Kelly said that he has tremendous respect for McCoy and would like to shake his hand. Safe to say, LeSean McCoy is not very much in favor of that idea.
Listen, man, Chip can't shake at all, nothing. He knows this. That's why I said it. I know him. He's very intelligent, so I can read between the lines. But like I said, I have nothing against him, no hatred. We're not enemies. I won't say anything wrong to him, but we don't have to. There's nothing for us to talk about.
They go into Philadelphia. The Bills commit 15 penalties, and the Eagles win by 3 late.
LeSean McCoy kissing the logo pregame on the field. Actually, there was a moment that was not talked about much. He actually greeted a special needs youngster in the tunnel, outside of the cameras. One of our photographers over at WIVB in Buffalo knew about it and was able, to cover the story. But it was something he tried to keep hidden, amongst all the hoopla and controversy, all the things that happened. He took his time out, 10 minutes before a game to say hello. I was impressed by that. But then the game happens, and he's thumping his chest and kissing the logo pregame. The Bills go out and get handled by a Chip Kelly team. Not crushed, but he had the upper hand, won the game. And I remember that LeSean McCoy, instead of going on the field to shake hands like everybody does every game, to talk to former teammates on the Eagles, to just have that post-game moment with the other team, he ran straight for the locker room. And in 17 years of covering this, I can think of maybe a handful of guys who have ever done that, who have just bolted off the field after a game for whatever reason. And a lot of times it's because it's a crushing loss for the team or a season ender, that kind of thing. This was all personal, and for whatever goodwill McCoy had built up, whatever side you wanted to take, the fact that he just took off after the game without talking to anybody kind of blew me away a little bit.
Yeah, you want to talk about WWE build-up? That week was wild. McCoy hadn't talked to Chip since the trade, which was kind of interesting. And, he claimed, Chip Kelly claimed he had tried to call him and LeSean wasn't taking his calls, and he kept he picked up once, found out it was Chip and hung up, and there was all this drama.
And high school.
LeSean is like swearing in his press conference with us on Wednesday, are you going to shake Chip Kelly's hand? And Chip can't shake it and all this. It was, he's not shaking my hand, all this. And I'm just thinking to myself, wow, like this guy is losing it. Like he has so much built up, animosity towards Chip Kelly. Then he came out and got shut down.
Yeah, that's another part of it too.
He did not play
bad
well.
Personal game.
And that's why, you talk about not only did he go off the field and not shake hands, he smashed his helmet against the wall.
Right.
It all gets caught on camera. It was not a shining moment for LeSean McCoy in his return. And Chip Kelly just quietly got to say, well, I tried to call him, and I like LeSean. I liked coaching him. And Chip Kelly came out looking like a good guy, but I think a lot of people sort of started to learn the backstory there.
Yeah, I don't got nothing to say. I got nothing to say. Excuse me.
I think LeSean's an emotional guy, and we were all hyped up. We wanted to win the game for him, but I don't think the emotion played. I think just dumb penalties killed us.
We wanted it for him, and we wanted it for ourselves, and he really took it to heart, as being one of our leaders and, getting the job done, and we did in the day.
The following week, the Bills go on the road. They take on the Washington professional football team, and I was there for this one. The start of this game could not have gone any worse for the Buffalo Bills, even with slim playoff chances. They really showed nothing at the start. Kirk Cousins marches the team down to the field for an opening drive touchdown to Jordan Reed. Bills punt from the Washington 41. The punt goes 17 yards. It doesn't even clear the 20. Cousins then marches the team down again. Another touchdown. This time, Cousins a touchdown run of his own. Bills go 3 and out where Tyrod Taylor is sacked twice. Cousins marches the team down for a third time. This time, another touchdown to Jordan Reed. The Bills move the ball into the red zone. And then Rex Ryan calls a direct snap to E.J. Manuel. Then he fumbles at the 5. Somehow falls on it. The Bills did not lose the ball inside the Washington 5. But they had 3 chances from the Washington 1 and couldn't score on them. The Bills were down. They woke up in the second half, but it was never really close as Washington wins 35-25 to eliminate them from the playoffs for the 16th consecutive season. And Jordan Reed looked like the second coming of Rob Gronkowski, and Kirk Cousins looked like the next Tom Brady because the Bills defense laid a total egg in the first half.
After the Eagles game, that was kind of the game where even though they weren't mathematically eliminated, you thought they were done. I remember on Monday being in the press room and just after going through the normal Monday interview routine, thinking, how did we get here again? Because I was convinced that preseason, like many, I guzzled the Kool-Aid, that the Bills were going to make the playoffs this year. And yet here we were, 5-6, playoff chances are nearly out. You knew it was over. To me, I thought the Bills team probably felt that too in the first half of that Washington game was that they knew it was done. They were the Bills again, and they didn't even bother showing up in Washington.
And that was where having Rex Ryan became a problem because there became a lot of finger pointing. Mario Williams missed a practice that week, called in sick. Reports came out that people didn't believe him. Coaches didn't believe him. And so after that Washington game was the first chance we got to talk to Mario, and he starts getting mad. There's insurgents in the building, and I remember asking him the questions.
Mario, there was a report that some people in the building didn't believe you when you called in sick. I mean, what's your reaction to that?
Who's that report?
Is reported, anonymous sources.
That's like saying we're insurgents. So we got insurgents around. I mean, how old are we around here? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess there's a bunch of younger people that I didn't realize in the office in the building, but I don't see how that happened. But like I said, if you can't say a name, then I don't go off of no names. Man. That's not adults, so I'm not worried about that.
And he starts getting so angry, and then Sammy Watkins goes off about how there's no leadership or accountability on the team. And there were even starting to be questions about Doug Whaley and Rex Ryan at that point because they were getting eliminated from the playoffs. They had made all these grand promises, and Rex is talking about the uncertainty surrounding them. And so that was sort of the game where you were like, this is a mess. And just a few weeks earlier, Rex was on top of the world after beating the Jets, and things fell apart so quickly.
There was no quit in anybody on that team, nobody in this locker room. And that's what I admire about us. But if we don't get better, I mean, it's, the reality of it is this, this is a professional, this is the National Football League, and unless we get a heck of a lot better, there's going to be changes. And that's what I told them. It's going to be drastic changes.
Well, the following week was as unspectacular as you could possibly imagine as the Dallas Cowboys, without Tony Romo, with Kellen Moore, take on the Buffalo Bills. The Bills go on to win this game. It was 9-6 with 3 minutes to go. I mean, that's all you need to know about this one. Bills win 16-6. But to your point, you mentioned the questions about Doug and Rex and their future with the Bills. On Wednesday, December 30th, right before the season finale, Terry Pegula issues a statement of support for Rex and Doug. And this quote, with hindsight, looks great. "This stable foundation is necessary to achieve long-term success in the NFL." Whew, yeah, got that one right, Terry. And then Week 17, the Bills host the New York Jets. One more time, Rex versus the Jets. This time, the Jets need a win and get into the postseason. And it's also Fitz's first start in Buffalo for the first time since he'd been cut by the Bills 3 years prior. Tyrod Taylor has a rushing touchdown to open the scoring, but Fitz picked off 3 times in the fourth quarter. The Bills end the season for the Jets, 22-17 the final. The Jets eliminated with a 10-6 record. A season that obviously had such high hopes ends at 8-8, but it ends with knocking the division rival out of postseason contention.
And again, the first game for Rex was the Super Bowl. This game was maybe one step below that. This was their last chance. And it was a heck of a win for the Bills because they played with next to no one. I mean, they had Charles Clay was injured, offensive linemen were injured, Kyle Williams had been long gone at this point. So it was a pretty good win for the Bills. I think the Jets and the Ryan Fitzpatrick that season was put together very flimsily all year, and everything fell apart in that game. That was more who the Jets really were that year, not the 10 games they had won previously. The Jets that year caught a really, really easy schedule.
Yeah, it was too little too late for Rex. I would compare that game to a year earlier when the Bills obviously the Jets were trying to win that game, and the Patriots didn't really care the year earlier when they beat them in the season finale. But I remember Doug Marrone coming into the press room after beating the Patriots and being like, this doesn't mean anything. Tom Brady wasn't playing. And it was awfully honest, right? You're right, it doesn't mean anything. And the following year, it was, okay, this means something because you knocked a division rival and your, ex-girlfriend, as he put it, out of the playoffs. But Rex came in just so sure of himself.
I was very honest about how I felt going into this game, that I got a lot of friends over there. There's no question about it, and I want them to be successful, but not at my expense. And that's what I said, and that's really how I feel. I feel great, proud of my football team.
Yeah, Rex, you didn't make the playoffs either. You were out of it before the Jets were. So good for you, good win, and maybe something to build on. But again, it felt empty in a lot of ways. And you mentioned the statement from Terry Pegula. If you have to say it, you have a problem, right?
Yeah.
I think that's always the case. If you have to say, oh yeah, this guy's our starting quarterback. Nobody ever asked the Patriots if Tom Brady's their starting quarterback. Nobody asked Robert Kraft about whether Belichick's going to be his coach next year. That's kind of when and that set the course for another weird offseason, which the Bills won in spectacular fashion.
Yeah. Oh, did they ever in 2016? But yeah, to put a final note on 2015, the Bills take that fourth-ranked defense, drop all the way to 19th. The offense improves. Tyrod Taylor has moments. LeSean McCoy looks very good. Sammy Watkins has a couple huge games over this season. But, just to say that it fell flat on their face would be an understatement for this year.
You go back to what my friends from Long Island said about Rex, about how they got tired of him, how it would happen quickly. My goodness, did it happen quickly. From the start of the season where everyone was up on a high, to the end of that year, I was done with it. It was not entertaining. It was the same old Bills. They were not a playoff team. There were not hopes for them becoming a playoff team the next year. And it was unbelievable how quickly the Rex Ryan circus wore out its welcome, at least for me in Buffalo.
Yeah, not even just for us. Fans were done with it at that point. All the drama, everything associated with Rex Ryan. Patience wore incredibly thin really fast. And you didn't want to jump to the knee-jerk reaction of Rex Ryan should be fired, but that's honestly what I felt should have happened. Cut your losses. You made the wrong hire, admit it, but I knew, a few weeks, it was after the Kansas City game, I believe, that I wrote, he should be fired, but he won't be. The Bills fans are stuck with him, unfortunately, at least for next year. You didn't know if he would get the full 3. Obviously, the 5 was in total jeopardy, but that's when you started to look at the contract and be like, wow, they're paying him, $27.5 million or whatever it was for the rest of it. No matter what, they're going to try to draw this thing out, and maybe he'll be able to, do something with it. But also the way the roster was put together, they were going to lose some pieces, and you just looked into the future and thought, yeah, 2016 is probably going to look like this.
Yeah. A 9-7 season in 2014 ends 8-8 in 2015. Lord forgive us because we have run long once again, as Rex Ryan is only through year 1 of his tenure with the Buffalo Bills. But to the next year of the Rex Ryan era, we turn to the following and the final episode of Down and Drought. We're so close to the finish line, we can see our families again. Stick around for the final episode of Down and Drought.